Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2017 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Frances McDormand won for her performance in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. But why did she beat fellow nominees Sally Hawkins, Margot Robbie, Saoirse Ronan, and Meryl Streep? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello, and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 90th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 2017. We'll be discussing how Frances McDormand won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today, you have heard on the Best Actress series and on many other iterations of And the Runner-Up Is over the years and its bonus series. But on the Best Actress series, she helped me break down the 1960 lineup, Elizabeth Taylor's first win. She also joined me earlier this year to break down some great screwball comedy performances like Rosalind Russell in His Girl Friday and Barbara Stanwyck in The Lady Eve for A Woman Robbed. Writer, podcaster, awards watch, citizen dame, the watch and talk. Welcome back, Karen Peterson.
Hello. So good to be back.
Always a pleasure to talk movies with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so excited when I got your message to come back on the show.
Yes.
So thank you
for a modern
me.
race for a change.
Yeah, something new and different.
I know. Yeah. Well, before we get into it, let's talk Best Actress as a category. You've told me your favorite Best Actress win of all time was Cher in Moonstruck. I assume that has stayed the same since your last episode. I don't know if anything's changed there, but
No, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
I still love that one so much. And I was actually just talking to someone about it the other day, completely forgetting that I had said that. And we were just talking about Moonstruck, and I was like, I just love this movie so much.
Yes, it has endured. Yes.
Yeah.
But now I'll ask you as an alternative, what's your favorite Best Actress lineup of all time?
This is probably a pretty basic answer, but 1950.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably the greatest lineup of any race of all time, like any category. So yeah. But a second one that I really like is actually, this may sound weird, but it's this one.
It's this one. Wow.
This one that we're about to talk about today. So yeah, when I look at every race, there's, throughout history, there's usually at least 1 or 2 movies I just haven't seen because I'm not as well versed as you are now. So there's usually some that I've missed.
Sickness as I do of having to watch everything.
Surprisingly not. Well, it's not that I don't have the same sickness, it's that I don't have the same amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
If I had the time to devote to it, I would love to actually have the time to do it. But yeah, and then there's always something that I'm like, I don't like it. And this race, which obviously we'll talk more specifically and dive in, but my feelings about the actresses and their performances in this race are separate in some cases from the movie. And so when I look at lineups, I think this is actually a really great lineup of actresses, and I'm really excited that I get to participate in this one.
Yes, very, very excited. And that definitely tees up the next question, because my other question I always ask for the first timer is your most heartbreaking loss in this category. And this totally blew me away because I must have internalized this maybe, but not actually was conscious of it when I was having you on for this. But I was shook listening back, and I heard you say Sally Hawkins in The Shape of Water is your most heartbreaking loss. I was like, what happened here? Like, something subconsciously stuck with me for me to be like, you have to be on this one. Wild.
This was meant to be.
It was.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. Like, I genuinely wasn't even on purpose of being like, oh, she said Sally Hawkins, so I have to have her on this one. It was just like, you make sense for this one for some cosmic reason. Anyway.
I love it.
Yes.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, we'll see how that I don't know. Maybe that'll change. We shall see. Let's keep up some suspense
Maybe.
for the listeners. Um, but anyway, this time I'll ask, what is your most heartbreaking snub overall in this category?
So I tend to look at snubs a little differently than other people do. For me, a snub is not just, oh, they didn't make it into the lineup. Because, to me, somebody who's kind of on the bubble, that's not a snub.
Right.
It's a category, a genre, an actress who is just ignored and overlooked. And so for me, one of mine, I really hate how much horror tends to be ignored when it comes to the Oscars. And so one of mine, I really wish Vera Farmiga would have been recognized at some point for the Conjuring series
Wow.
because she does such, especially the first one,
Mm-hmm.
she just does such great work in those movies. And I would love to have seen her nominated.
That is a great shout out. And especially, like 2013 would have been the first one. We can
Mhm.
maybe not have Meryl for August Osage County and
I mean,
slot in Vera Farmiga. And that would be, that would definitely hold up to history. But yes, there are
yeah.
many, many over the decades in that genre that the Oscars just, I don't know what it is.
I don't know. It's horror and comedy. Everybody acknowledges that they're difficult to do well.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when we see it done well, we still fail to recognize it. And I don't understand it. I'll never understand it.
Yeah. And I don't know how you unlearn that for Oscar
Right.
voters, to be like, oh,
Yeah.
well, but on the other hand, this person is playing a real person in a drama. And, that is what we like to reward. So we have to nominate that.
Mhm.
And it's just like,
Of
come
course.
on. Yeah, it's very annoying. So very, very good choice there. Very unique because we haven't heard that one before. So always appreciate that. So having said that, let's talk about this year at the Oscars, the 90th Academy Awards. The nominees were Sally Hawkins in The Shape of Water, Frances McDormand in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Margot Robbie in I, Tonya, Saoirse Ronan in Lady Bird, and Meryl Streep in The Post, with the winner being Frances McDormand. So before we break down these performances individually, I guess you can go ahead and expand upon your thoughts about why this is one of your favorite lineups of all time.
I think these are 5 exceptional actresses. We have repeat nominees Frances McDormand and Saoirse Ronan and Meryl Streep,
Mm-hmm.
who are all really talented. And then you also have Margot Robbie and Sally Hawkins joining in, and just taking it as a whole, the whole category. I mean, there were a couple of others that were circling throughout the season, but it felt like these were the 5 for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And they all just, each character that they play is so different and so unique. And I mean, a couple of them are playing real people, a couple of them are playing fictional people. And just what they do and just this spectrum of performances are just, it's beautiful. It's really it's just they're heartbreaking and they're funny and they're just so captivating, each and every one of them. And again, some of my thoughts on the movies themselves may vary a little bit, but I think that these, as modern day performances go, I think this is such a good snapshot of really great talent.
Amen. Yes, I completely agree. I love this lineup. It is definitely one of the great lineups in recent years, where I feel like any of them could have won, and I would have been pretty happy with the outcome, Even with Frances having already won, it was definitely exciting for her to have this moment and, deliver such an incredible speech, which I'm sure we'll maybe get into later. But, I love that we have Saoirse continuing her success at the Oscars at such a young age, and with this great coming of age story that, that's also a genre that sometimes struggles, sort of teen coming of age stories. So love that. Love that Sally Hawkins got this moment. How cool that Sally Hawkins is the lead of a Best Picture winner and playing such a challenging role. Margot Robbie definitely proving here that she's more than just, glamorous movie star Margot Robbie, that there's real talent there, and having her Oscar breakthrough. And one of the main stories, at least for my show here, is that this is the final Meryl nomination that I'll be covering for now, at least. She will probably be back, as we would expect that, but it's been a while. It's been since 2017. kind of bittersweet that we're here, but happy she ended this run of nominations on a pretty high note, I would say. So,
Yeah. I would also like to point out for this year, I mean, we were so close to going 5 for 5 with all of these actresses in Best Picture nominees.
mm-hmm.
And it's so rare it's so rare for Best Actresses to be nominated for Best Picture movies, nominees. And to have it be 4 out of 4 and not, or 4 out of 5. And then also, these aren't situations where they're all co-leads. It's like a for example Lily Gladstone last year where she's sharing that with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Or Carey
These
Mulligan
are
with Bradley Cooper. Yeah.
right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. These are the leads of their movies. These movies are about these women, and that's so rare. And it was really such an exciting time.
It was. It really was. And there was definitely a chance that I, Tonya could have been in the Best Picture conversation. Like, I'm sure it might have been 10th for all we know. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that wasn't just like a lone nominee like we sometimes, or not sometimes, often get in this category, is lone nominees in Best Actress. So that's a little bit of progress, I think.
It would be nice to see that continue.
It would, yes. We shall always hope. I think
Yes.
we're going to have fun discussing these, and even if the race maybe ended up being a little boring, perhaps, with Frances kind of sweeping everything, I think the category itself is far from dull. So,
Absolutely.
yes. So with that said, let's jump right in here, starting with Sally Hawkins in The Shape of Water. Okay, so Sally's getting her second Oscar nomination here, first in lead. So to introduce her here, she was born in London, the daughter of children's book authors, and she eventually studied acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. She mostly did theater work at the beginning of her career, and then in 2002, she had her first collaboration with Mike Leigh for All or Nothing, and they worked together again in Vera Drake and Happy Go Lucky, for which she won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical, but that sadly did not translate to an Oscar nomination, somewhat shockingly. She also worked a lot in TV, but her film work continued with roles in films like Submarine, Never Let Me Go, Jane Eyre. A lot of her work was in more supporting roles, including eventually Blue Jasmine, which got her a supporting actress nomination at the Oscars. Other roles, Godzilla, Paddington, kind of an eclectic group of films, and then she gets this prime role in The Shape of Water and gets, career best notices. So this is a Guillermo del Toro film, and he wrote the film with her in mind for the lead, having been a fan of hers, and I didn't know this before, but he apparently pitched it to her when he was drunk at the Golden Globes, the year of Blue Jasmine. So it all kind of conspired for this to happen, and she agreed to it. So considering she's playing a mute woman in this film, she studied silent film stars like Chaplin and Keaton and Harold Lloyd and Stan Laurel. So she really studied extensively from that era, and the film is about Sally as Eliza, a mute woman living in 1960s Baltimore who works at a government lab as a cleaner alongside her coworker and friend Zelda, played by Octavia Spencer. She also has a next-door neighbor, Giles, Richard Jenkins, who she's friends with. So she becomes intrigued by this sort of humanoid amphibian man that they've captured from South America, and she befriends him, and they develop an unexpected bond. But when she sees him being tortured, she devises a plan with Giles and Zelda to bust him out of the facility undetected. Okay, let's get to our first nominee here, Sally Hawkins. Very curious your thoughts overall on Sally as an actress, and yeah, why you consider this the ultimate heartbreaking loss.
So I love Sally Hawkins. And like you said, so much of her career has been in supporting roles, sometimes very small supporting roles, but she's one that really makes such an impact anytime she's on screen, no matter what it is. And it's always just so nice to see her. And then to have her basically just jump right into the spotlight with The Shape of Water. It was unexpected for me. I was looking forward to this movie because I'm such a fan of Del Toro. And I think even his movies that are not as strong are always beautiful. And there's always something I love about a Del Toro experience, really. And so I was excited about this, but I was not expecting to fall in love with it as much as I did. And Sally Hawkins is a big part of the reason why. What she does with this character and the way that she is able to just be so expressive and so beautiful without ever saying a word, spoken word. She communicates, but without speaking a word, and just how you feel everything that she's feeling and you experience this right along with her. It's just it's so beautiful. And I love watching her. I just watched it again yesterday. I've seen it twice this year, I think. And
Okay.
I just every time I watch this movie, I find myself just more drawn to it and just falling in love with it a little bit more.
Hmm.
And that's all because of her and the work that she does.
Yeah, I really like Sally Hawkins a lot. Maybe she's not one of my top favorites necessarily, but it's one of those where like every time I see her, I'm delighted that she's there. She just has a very warm presence more often than not that I just find very charming, but also a real depth that you see in a lot of the collaborators of Mike Leigh and his sort of troupe of actors with like Brenda Blethyn and Imelda Staunton and Timothy Spall, Marion John Baptiste, that whole crew of just like she, like them, I think is so expressive, even in seemingly ordinary roles, and just infusing a lot of depth and complexity. I think she does that really well in Happy Go Lucky and even her more supporting turns like Vera Drake or Blue Jasmine, but especially here where there is, there's always such a challenge for an actor to play mute and communicate through sign language when they aren't already equipped to do that and have much knowledge of it beforehand. But yeah, I think she really rises to the occasion. I think there's so much depth of feeling in her face, in the way that she signs, that really shows how passionate this character is beneath the kind of meek surface of how she presents herself to the world most of the time. And yeah, I just think she communicates that sort of wistful feeling and the compassion she has for this creature with an earnestness that I think is very well earned. I think there's just like so many risks involved with something like this, like having to show everything without saying a word and make you believe she's falling in love with this creature, and to make that feel earned and genuine and not too silly and sort of sentimental even. So I just think it's a very earnest and romantic kind of performance, and I can see why some people may not be on the film's wavelength and have their arms crossed watching it, but I do sort of get swept up in it largely because of her performance, like you said.
Yeah, I have over the last few years, I've spent a lot of time either defending or just ignoring really bad faith arguments about this movie
Yeah.
specifically, and how dismissive people have been
Mm-hmm.
about it and how reductive they've been, when really this is a movie about others, otherness, about monstrosity. It's about so many things, and it's ultimately a fairy tale, but a very grounded one. It's not a Disney fairy tale, and it's not quite a Grimm's fairy tale either. It's somewhere in between, where it does have this level of earnestness, but it also has a lot of strength and power. But it's disguised, and it's so subtle in certain ways. It's very overt in others, but it's so I agree with you. It is easy for some people to miss what is really going on here and what's really at stake. But I think if you can look past some of the more obvious comparisons of things like Creature from the Black Lagoon and really look at what Del Toro is using those references to achieve, he does, and it's beautiful.
Right. Or Splash, which when I posted that I was watching this, somebody commented that, and I'm like, can we move on? Like, I'm so tired of this comparison.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes.
Mhm.
Also, I love just her first scene, how we establish her. I hope this doesn't sound too like perverted, I guess, but I like that it's showing her actually pleasuring herself in the bathtub, because like it shows that she has this very real desire, and how she may seem reserved and kind of simple maybe, but and humble, on the surface, but that doesn't mean she's not just as passionate or complicated or, as everyone else. And, I love that we see this very sweet relationship she has with her neighbor Giles. And there's just this very lyrical quality in her gestures that is a lot like just water itself, I think, in her facial reactions. Very graceful. We have these lovely little details like of her seeing the dancers on the TV and them talking about it, and then her leaving and doing a little dance of her own in the hallway. And yeah, it seems a lot harder than it looks, the way that she says so many different things with her face. And her expressiveness really helps a lot in showing that she does have this very shy sensibility, but also there's something very timeless there too, and like a silent film in those wistful expressions on the bus, or like her curious looks at Giles sometimes when he's like talking about his crush on the local diner waiter, or things like that. Just, I think the film is filled with so many moments of her just being so locked in with her scene partner that I just find it captivating.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to comment on about what you were just saying,
Yeah,
but just on that specifically. Yeah, no, and I love it. But just specifically to what you're talking about with the way that she's able to communicate. There's a scene pretty late, well, probably halfway through, when she's trying to convince Giles to help her with this plan. And she's pouring her heart out to him. She makes him repeat after her, like, speak what I am signing. And the way that she's expressing what this amphibious man does for her, and how he opens her up and he really makes her feel seen, makes her feel valued, makes her feel just beautiful and worthy of love, even all of those things. And as she's communicating that to Giles, we're hearing Giles say her words, but she is so expressive in that moment that we're feeling it come from her, even though we're not hearing her voice, we're hearing his. And that's such a delicate balance, and it's so masterfully played to actually feel the emotion coming from her and not from Richard Jenkins, who also gives a fantastic performance. But really in that moment, it's about the two of them, but it's really coming from it's Eliza's emotions, and I love it so much.
Yeah, that's the anger there and the passion, and you can see her welling up with tears too. It's so raw, and having Richard Jenkins with his lovely voice kind of like translating that at the same time, and they just work off of each other so well too. I think he's just as much reason as anyone that her performance works so well. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, I just love the...
I want to...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Well, I wanted to back up to what you had started off talking about, which is like her morning routine and things including self-pleasure, which we don't see from women very often.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that's something that tends to be looked down upon. But it's not just that, it's everything she does in her day-to-day. And it's establishing that she is a normal woman with needs, with desires, with passion and depth. And she's not just some silly, frilly little princess who, a prince wanders into her life and she falls in love. There's so much more to her than that.
Yeah.
And we see that in those little ways, like from her morning routine, which includes also preparing her lunch and, and just all the things that she does. And everything is so specific, but she has these routines down, and it's all about taking care of herself. And it's just such an interesting introduction to Eliza. And it gives us so much in such a short and easy way about who she is and what she prioritizes.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a very, very show not tell, which I appreciate always. And thinking about the chemistry she has with the amphibian man, I'm very curious what your thoughts are on that, because for me, it surprised me just how quickly I just sort of buy into it. I don't know, just the way she kind of tilts her head forward and has such an open body language, I think is so crucial in that, and in making this very direct connection with him. And she doesn't show any fear or hatred or trepidation, even when he kind of growls at her at first. It's just like this kindness and sympathy and just openness to anything.
Yeah. Well, first of all, credit to Doug Jones, who
Credit Doug
does
Jones.
play
Yes.
the man,
Hmm.
who is such a terrific physical actor. He's like, you hardly ever see his face on screen. He's usually covered by makeup or blue dots and CGI. But he is such a astounding physical actor. But I think just these early moments with the two of them, for one thing, the first time that Eliza really had any experience with him was when he was attacking. He had been just brought in, and so she knows that he physically has the capacity to be very violent. So when he growls at her and leaves, she's charmed by that because she knows that if she was in any actual danger, he would have done something, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
He
Good
just kind
point.
of has a little fit and swims away. And I'm with you. I buy into it so easily. I think just because what we don't know much about Eliza, we know nothing about her backstory really, other than that she came from an orphanage. She was found by a riverbank, and there's obviously more to that story.
Hmm.
But she's always been on the outside. She's always been different. She's never quite fit in. She has her couple of friends that she's managed to kind of build a life with, but she's always been on the outside of everything. And so for her to be drawn to this creature who is obviously different and to just feel this instant connection with him, it makes sense. And it's just, it does feel so easy. And part of that is the way that we have all the elements, the way that the camera moves, and there's a lot of just seeing the two of them from kind of below, where it's just kind of elevating the images, and then the way that Duplass score, which I think is one of his best scores,
Yeah.
honestly, the way that it interacts is almost acts as another character throughout the film, but really the way that some of these moments just really ebb and flow between the two of them, it's also beautiful, and it's easy to buy into this building burgeoning love story very quickly.
Yeah. Everything technical and the performances, everything is in concert with each other, which is what
Mm-hmm.
makes this such a beautifully directed film. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And also, I want to talk about her scenes with Michael Shannon, who is also great because he's just very good at these kinds of characters. But,
Yeah.
she just sees right through him, and she knows him to be the real monster here, and the way he tries to intimidate her and also sort of come on to her at one point is just very unsettling. But she's so visibly disgusted by him, and there is some fear there, but there's also a real determination to outsmart him and just do what's right, which is obviously kind of this classic sort of fairy tale hero's journey type of thing. I think even within that archetype, and I think the film is kind of filled with a lot of archetypes, even within that, she is very three-dimensional and compelling in showing that despite her appearance, she has this almost righteous sort of drive within her that is just getting stronger and stronger the more this injustice is being allowed to happen. And it doesn't feel put on at all. It's not like cheesy necessarily, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Well, and I think that with different actors, it might have been cheesy.
Yeah.
I think part of the strength of it is that you have such talented people on screen and behind the scenes, just all working so well together. And Michael Shannon is a perfect example of that. And honestly, the fact that he wasn't nominated for this is just like, he should have been.
Yeah.
And this should have been a case where you had all four acting categories for this movie. It should have happened, but nevertheless, that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
So,
Well, who would be best actor? Doug Jones?
no, I think Shannon. I think that
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
he could have been a lead in this case, but he's just, but that's the thing, is like, if he went supporting, which I don't remember what happened there, but then if he got in over Richard Jenkins, that wouldn't have felt like, I wanted
Right.
everybody nominated is really what it comes down to.
I know.
But yeah, but yeah, just the way Michael Shannon embodies the real monster. His whole thing is this creature is a monster. It's this thing. It doesn't belong. It's not part of our world. and I have to beat it into submission or eventually maybe kill it. And Shannon is the real monster. And there's no, that's never a question. I mean, even in the introduction, when Giles is narrating the intro to the story, he talks about the monster who tried to keep them apart, them being Eliza and the man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Michael Shannon's character who's the monster. And he that's established so early on. The first time the first time Eliza really meets him is in the bathroom when
Yep.
he just, you know, I still want to know what it says about a man when he washes his hands and when he doesn't, but
Hmm.
uh that's a question I'll always have. But yeah, just the way that she kind of unlocks something in him too unintentionally, which is like he kind of develops or maybe just starts to see this fetish side of him,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of contributes to his monstrosity, and just the way that he looks down on everybody and he wants to have power. In many people's eyes, he is the one with all the power, and she sees through that. She sees him for what he really is. And she, even though she's a little bit afraid of what he could do to her or to this creature that she loves, she doesn't buy into who he thinks he is and who the world thinks that he is. And that's another form of power that she has.
Yeah. She is very observant, you know?
Mhm.
That is her whole style. And I also love when it goes into full like action mode and she's pulling off this little mini heist of sorts to get the amphibian man out of the facility without being caught. And she's so sharp in her instincts. Like when, Michael Stuhlbarg, who's also here, when his character catches her, but she kind of smooths it over a little and gets him to be more sympathetic to her cause and everything. It's a very delicate operation, and I love how Del Toro just builds that sequence so beautifully. And then when she's like facing some trouble after the fact with Michael Shannon calling her in and Zelda in to ask them if they know anything about this escape, and they both deny knowing anything, but then Eliza just has this look in her eye like she's almost amused in a way about this whole thing, and she knows she got one over on him, and she starts to sign FUCKYOU with almost like this smug look on her face, which is so funny because I think you as an audience are just very invested in her gaining that agency.
Yeah, especially if you know how to fingerspell and you know before it starts translating for you.
Yeah.
It's just such a
I
great
know.
moment. I love that. Yeah. But yeah, she is very observant. She's very adept at reading people and knowing who to trust, who not to. She knows not to let Zelda in on her plan, for example.
Yeah.
It's just her and Giles. And then Zelda figures out something's going on and basically tries to stop her. And then that's when she's able to convince Zelda, like, no, I need you to help me. And so she kind of collects people. She collects the Stuhlbarg what's his name? Dr.
I
Yeah.
forgot.
Anyway,
I
I
feel
can't
like
think of his name right now.
Hofstetter, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Did I make that up? I don't think so.
No, I think that's right.
Okay.
I think that's right. Um yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr.
Okay.
Hofstetter.
Okay.
Um but yeah, she has this way because of her being outside of, normal, human interaction, normal society. She also is able to bring together other people. So her best friend is a gay man, and her best friend at work is a black woman, and then you also Dr. Hofstetler, he's undercover. He's a spy for the Russians who's
Mm-hmm.
placed there. Nobody knows this. She doesn't know this at first either. But because of his place and because of the fact that he's actually, yes, he's a spy for the Russians, but he's also just kind of working. He at this point, he's for the amphibian man. He's not for the Russians or the Americans. He
Right.
thinks they're both wrong. And so he's on the outside of that too. So she basically just brings together this crew of people that are all outside of society's norms. And that is where she is so strong. And that is why she's able to pull it over on Strickland because he underestimates not only her, but everyone that she is working with. He just underestimates everybody because they couldn't possibly be smart enough to pull this off. And so he doesn't even consider them as any sort of a threat.
Yeah. And everything you're saying there is like, did people really wonder why this movie won Best Picture? Because like this is all things that we were talking about during, I'll just say it, the first Trump administration.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just, wanted to point that out. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting also to see her taking that relationship to the next level after that and having this at least implied sex, which is very lovingly framed. And she plays that so genuinely without any hesitance at all that you kind of do buy it, even if maybe it's on paper, it's a big ask for the audience to buy into it. But again, it's that lyrical quality to her performance that makes you believe she would connect to this man. And she also has this lovely, lovely scene of her evoking classic cinema in this sort of fantasy dream sequence of her singing "You Never Know How Much I Love You" and them dancing. And I know it looks maybe strange or even cringy out of context if you're not buying into it by this point, but it is very evident, I think, just how head over heels she is for him, and just that look of affection on her face is just really beautiful. And she looks so elegant. Like, I just always like that scene.
I love that scene.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And it's interesting because in a movie that is so colorful and where color plays such an important part, to not only have this interesting scene where she starts off singing and we haven't heard her voice up to this point,
Mm-hmm.
but she's dancing, she's in this beautiful gown, but all the color is stripped away and it's black and white. So it's this beautiful, it really does set aside that this is a fantasy sequence in a fantasy movie. And yeah, it's just so lovely and it's so sweet. And it's her way. This is just another way of her expressing herself and connecting. And it draws in her love. I mean, she and Giles sit and watch a lot of movies. And she loves that. She's swept up in that old Hollywood glamour, and so it fits the character of Eliza that this would be sort of her fantasy dream sequence, would be in that realm. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yes, and you can feel the Del Toro love of cinema there beyond his usual like sci-fi horror monster stuff and his typical sort of fixations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think towards the end, it gets much more plot driven ultimately, and not always giving her necessarily the most in terms of character development. It is just kind of getting to this point of them knowing that he has to be in the ocean again. And it's kind of a question of how she's going to cope with perhaps him not being around anymore. And it turns out she may not have to. I'm just curious your thoughts on the ending as well.
Yeah, well, what I like about, I mean, you're right. The ending is it's more action, it's more plot driven,
Yeah.
it's less about the individual characters, but I think that it's such a lovely summation of kind of bringing everybody together, bringing all these pieces together. Zelda's not there at the dock, but she's part of that ending sequence, and you really see just everyone working together to accomplish Eliza's goal, which is to get the creature back into the water so that he can go home. And then of course this includes a standoff with Strickland. And I think it's such a great like big movie ending.
Yeah.
And it's everything about it. It's exciting, it's beautiful, it's scary because you think, oh no, they're gonna, one of them is going to die.
Right.
And what's going to happen? But you also know, wait, I've been watching a fairy tale for the last 2 hours. Obviously something is going to happen here. This isn't going to end on, like, you just can't, by that point you can't imagine a movie like this ending on a sad, depressing note. It's got to end hopefully, and it does, and it's just, I think it's such a perfect ending for this story.
I agree. And just the imagery in those final moments is priceless, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and in that moment we learn something, I think. I mean, apparently it's subject to interpretation, but I think we learned the ultimate thing about Eliza and where she really came from too. So
Yes, indeed.
Mhm.
Yes, with her scales.
Yes, her
um,
gills
right,
and yeah.
her gills. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those performances that is so in concert with everything else happening within the film that, for as great as she is, which I do think she is absolutely phenomenal, you could see why maybe that could get lost among all of the other technical elements there, in terms of, like Oscar like voting types things. But I think she is so in service of the film that she's in that if she were to do anything less or more, it would have thrown off the balance. So
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think that overall, just that I mean, this is really such a great thing that Del Toro has constructed because it is a perfect marriage of performance, script, and technical elements all coming together. And it's such a rare thing to be able to see something that really does do all of those things so well. This movie could have won 14 Oscars and it wouldn't have felt wrong, you know? It really is true, but it's also fine that it won what it won, that four is also a good number.
yeah,
And because you also like to spread the wealth a little bit too. So but yeah, I love Sally Hawkins so much in this movie. I think it is the role of her lifetime. I
yeah.
would love to see her do another big juicy part like this, but I even if that doesn't happen again for her, I'm so happy that she has this one. And even though she didn't win the Oscar, I'm so glad that she was at least recognized by the Academy with the nomination. This really is, especially in a year like this one,
Right.
it really is such an honor to be nominated.
Yeah, and with so many loud performances in the mix too.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to our next nominee here, Margot Robbie in I, Tonya. Okay, so Margot Robbie gets her first Oscar nomination here, the only first time nominee in this group. So, Margot was born in Queensland, Australia, and she attended circus school when she was young. Very interested in performing, and she studied acting at Somerset College. She eventually had her breakthrough in the soap opera Neighbours in 2008, which she starred in until 2011. She then went to Hollywood and had a starring role on the short-lived series Pan Am. Shout out to Pan Am, before she had her true mainstream breakthrough with worldwide recognition for her supporting role in The Wolf of Wall Street. And she used some of that newfound success to found a production company, Lucky Chap Entertainment. So meanwhile, she was in films like Focus and Z for Zachariah, and she had a cameo in The Big Short. Then in 2016, she made her big splashy debut as Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad, which got her a lot of attention. And then the very next year here, she's in this very challenging role playing Tonya Harding in I, Tonya. So the script for I, Tonya was shopped around town and got on the desk of Lucky Chap, which is where Margot got involved. And she apparently didn't even know Tonya Harding at all or had any idea of this incident and this whole tabloid scandal in the 90s, having come from Australia and all. So she just assumed this was
Also having been 4 years old when this happened.
well, yes, that's fair. I mean, to be fair,
Sorry.
I knew about it. I'm not that much older, but anyway. So I, Tonya, based on the real life wild story of Tonya Harding, who grew up in an abusive household with a very demanding mother, Lavana, played here by Allison Janney. And she grew up lower middle class, and sort of struggled to fit in within the more refined world of ice skating. But she worked hard and eventually became the first American female skater to land the triple axel, and she had big Olympic prospects. Meanwhile, she had a tumultuous relationship with her husband, Jeff, played here by Sebastian Stan, who eventually conspired with his friend Sean, Paul Westerhauser, to take out Tanya's rival, Nancy Kerrigan, leading to the big incident where they hired a guy to come in and viciously strike Nancy Kerrigan's knee, which forced her out of competition, and it became a huge scandal. And the film tells that story within the framework of this sort of quasi mockumentary format, I guess, with Tonya, Jeff, and Lavana and others giving their talking heads to the camera about Tanya's life. So let's talk Margot Robbie. Thoughts on Margot overall as an actress and her performance in I, Tonya?
I adore Margot Robbie as an actress. I think she brings so much to every role that she takes on. It's been crazy watching her trajectory in
Yeah.
really a short amount of time.
Even since
Um,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I mean, you started listing off some of her early work, and it's like none of that was that long ago,
Yeah.
really. I mean, Pan Am was on in 2011.
hmm
That's very short.
Yeah, I know.
And yeah, and just looking at where she's come since then and just how it really she's in like not only was she doing this so quickly, but she landed in the right places very quickly and in big movies, working with Scorsese,
Hmm.
really early on, getting into the DCU really early and then some Disney and other work. What I really admire about her is that she knew that she had this in her. She knew she had it in her to be a star, and she as soon as she could, she sets up a production company. And not only does she produce films, but she's producing some really great stuff. And really she's a champion for female filmmakers and stories about women, and she's basically living all the things that people have been promising and have been saying that they're supporting for years. She's like, I'm gonna do it, and she does. And we have gotten some really great work, like behind the scenes but also on screen from her over the years. And I adore her. And when I heard that she was going to be playing Tonya Harding, I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I don't know. That
Yeah.
seems generous. I mean, no disrespect to Tonya Harding, but the
Right.
casting of Margot Robbie and Sebastian Stan just felt a little bit like, okay, what are we doing here?
Right. Yeah.
But then I saw the movie and I was so impressed by how much effort and work she put into transforming herself, not physically, but really, getting into sort of this mindset of a person who grew up in, like you said, an abusive home, with just kind of everything against her and being on the cusp of stardom and kind of throwing it all away by making one really stupid decision. And it's just to be able to humanize someone who the world has vilified for such a long time, but also not let her off the hook.
Yeah.
That's such great work from Margot Robbie. And my opinions of the movie, it's been 7 years, but I'm still trying to figure it out. But my
Yeah.
opinion of Margot Robbie in this role is just she nails it and she does a great job.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, I'm going to be totally honest. It did take me a little while to recognize Margot Robbie's talent. And it's not that I found her bad. I did not hate her at all. I didn't even find her average. I was just like, she's a very good actress. I don't know if I fully believed she is like one of the greats necessarily yet, but I found her very good in The Wolf of Wall Street and Suicide Squad and this even, but I don't know if it fully clicked for me of being like, this person is here to stay. Oddly enough, until Barbie last year, which I just found to be such a great performance and so tricky, but she got that role so right. And it definitely made me start to reevaluate a little bit whether I had maybe underrated some of her earlier work. So this was a film that I was most intrigued to revisit for this episode. And she really impressed me so much more than when I saw this in 2017. And I was very cynical about it, feeling like here's this glamorous star doing the D-glam and playing this lower class person and everything, and not also really loving some of the sort of smugness of this movie necessarily and how it could feel sometimes. So I didn't really love this nomination compared to some of the others here. But I gotta say, I had an almost complete 180 on this rewatch. I love her totally jaded attitude in this sort of present day documentary scenes where she just seems like she's just been run down by life. And she just has this very frank and, blue collar way of speaking and just being like, here are my accomplishments. I was the first US woman to land the triple axel. And yet, I didn't look the right way and I didn't have the right background, so fuck them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just, and the accent work is so specific, but much better than I remember it being too. Just that rough around the edges quality that you can't really unlearn from growing up a certain way in an abusive household. And yeah, you can just see why she was so drawn to this character and just wanted to make a meal out of it, which I think she does.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things that is tricky, and this is also credit to the script, which I think there's some subtlety here that I think is really easy to miss. I certainly missed it the first time I saw this movie.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, I haven't revisited it since 2017, like
Right.
you.
Right.
So this week was the first time I'd watched it in 7 years. And at the time, there was so much happening because there was a lot of conversation about it had been so many years since this happened. It was 1994 and Tonya was going to speak about it. There was just a lot of renewed curiosity about the incident. And so much of, some of it was like, we're going to clear the air. We're going to, like, there's so many people don't really know what happened. We're going to get into that. And then there was still a lot of misinformation happening. And I think that what I discovered upon rewatching the movie was that they really do a good job, and Margot sells it so well, of continuing that same fervor that was happening when the movie came out, of
Hmm.
she's sitting down and she's talking with this very specific frankness of, well, I'm just going to tell you what's what. But even then, she's telling a version of the truth that she probably has convinced herself is the truth. But we know more than what she's actually telling us. And we know
Mhm.
that she's not telling us everything. We know she's exaggerating some things, or omitting certain facts, or kind of trying to rewrite history to make herself not look like a bad guy. And that's such a delicate balance of what she has to do to come across as believable, even when what she's saying is not something that we should totally trust. And she does such a great job with that.
Agreed. And also, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about how even like 3 to 4 to 5 years later, this would not have been a movie. This would have been a limited series. And we
Mm-hmm.
would have
It's so
gotten
true.
a different perspective for each episode. Like, here's what Jeff Galooly has to say. Here's what Lavana has to say. Here's, obviously Tonya could thread throughout because it is her story, but I could just see them trying to play a lot with the different perspectives there, kind of like what the Monsters limited series just did on Netflix, sort of, in a way. So,
Yeah,
just saying.
or the Pamela Anderson
Or Pam and
tape.
Tommy. Yeah,
Yeah,
which
Pam and
is
Tommy. I
also
couldn't
Craig
remember what it was
Gillespie
called.
and Sebastian Stan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that, but that's such a good point. And I'm glad that this didn't get that treatment, because I
Same.
think it works very well as an hour and 45-minute film,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that some of these limited series would work better if they were more condensed and just, get to the point,
Yeah,
guys.
I know.
Mhm.
That's just the
Yeah,
climate we're in these days, I guess.
it's true.
That those
Yeah.
kind of stories have to be limited series. There's for
We
some
need
reason
content.
yeah, we do. We need to pad it out with 8 episodes.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's a whole other
Yeah,
story. But
it is.
yeah. I just think this is another one where she's communicating so much through her eyes, I think, in terms of like, even in those earlier scenes of her growing up, like when she's getting to know Jeff in the beginning and their relationship, and there's that like slightly shy quality and that cautiousness there of not even really knowing social skills all that well. I don't entirely believe her to be like 15 in those earlier scenes necessarily, but when she has like the braces on her teeth, I'm like, this feels a little bit like, the classic sort of 30-year-old playing a high schooler type of thing on like a teen show. But after a while, I start to lose myself in it.
I hear you. And I was thinking about this actually. And I don't know how often you think about yourself in high school or tell stories about yourself or when you were a teenager.
I try to forget. Go on.
I mean, most of us probably do. But I don't know. And maybe this is just a me thing, but when I talk about myself in the past when I was younger, I don't picture myself as a kid. I always picture myself at kind of whatever age I'm
Interesting.
at.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, and because I mean, obviously, when she's a little kid, that though that there's she's played by a child,
Yeah.
and but when she gets to that teenage point and she's meeting Jeff and everything, it's like she's narrating a story, and I was like, I don't necessarily think this is what they were going for, but I can see why it works
Yeah.
because she's telling the story as she sees herself, and so for that, I was like, okay, I can go along with this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that interpretation. Yeah. Um yeah, and I like when he's like telling her she's so pretty and she doesn't even believe him. And there is just like that slightly gawkiness in her sensibility that she really nails. And as the
Yeah.
relationship progresses and he starts to hit her and they fight, and she starts to just assume that it's her fault because that's how she was raised under her horrible mother. And she still fights back, but there's also that layer of feeling kind of worthless and this kind of cloud of negativity that's surrounding her when she's not in the skating rink that I think is very effective. Just that kind of like slightly wounded quality of like not wanting to trigger someone's anger in a way that I think she really gets that sort of, again, that someone who grew up in a childhood of abuse. That's how they
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
act. Yeah.
Absolutely. And well, and I think that that's what sets this apart from just from being reduced to just a glamorous Hollywood star
Right.
deglamming herself to step into this, this poor, not even middle class person.
Yeah.
And it's in the way that she's able to communicate that internalized trauma, the victim of abuse who really does think that, if someone's hitting me, it's because I did something to deserve it. And that's a real experience. And she's able to communicate that in such a believable way. I can't imagine what Margot herself had to do to get herself into that place emotionally, but she does it so convincingly. It doesn't feel like she's just playing an abuse victim. It feels like she has experienced that. It feels very real and very grounded.
Yeah. I don't know how methody she got with it, but it
I
definitely
don't know.
feels that way. Like she had to rely on those kind of tricks, maybe. But yeah, very effective. And it's just sad to watch her also be so aggressive, like with the judges, for example, or her coach, and yelling at them or throwing things, because it's obviously partly a learned behavior, I think. But you can just see how it's so frustrating to her that like this is the one thing that she thinks she's good at, and yet she's encountering all this pushback and this, these horrible comments just about her presentation and her choice of music and her outfit. And she knows that she's good underneath all that superficial stuff, but she hardly gets the credit for it that she thinks she deserves. And you can't blame her in a way for having some of those outbursts. And I think you get that through her performance, that kind of just like boiling energy that just naturally comes spewing out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, she just has such this constant current of emotions that she can't let out because if
Right.
she says the wrong thing to the wrong person, she's going to get hit. She's going to get a gun in her face maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so she doesn't have an outlet. And she's also in a situation where she really is one of the best in the world to do what she does, and she's not able to get the recognition for it or the acclaim for it because she doesn't fit the mold, because she doesn't look the part, she doesn't act the part. And it, for us on the outside, it kind of really, I don't know, it kind of contextualizes the idea of, I love to watch the Olympics, and when they talk about, oh, the best in the world, it's like, how do we really know that these are the best people in the world? These are just the ones that got to make it to this point. And Tonya is basically saying that
Yeah.
out loud to their faces of like, you're not actually rewarding the best, you're rewarding the ones who fit your version of the best.
Right. And whoever has the best overall package, and like it's all, again, that's superficial thing that she feels like she can never, for as much as she tries, she can never get to that point. And it's,
Yeah.
you feel that sympathy for her, even if at other times you feel like maybe not. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then it kind of leads to this question of, was the incident inevitable?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this just something that because of who Tonya Harding was or is, this was always going to happen? Or if she had been accepted from an early age for exactly who she is, would this needed to have happened in the first place? Like
Exactly.
who's really, and she even asks the question, like, who's really to blame for all of this happening?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
it entirely her? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I love when we have her explaining from her side of the story that she and Nancy Kerrigan were friends, and the
Mhm.
media made them out to be like Nancy is the princess and Tonya is, I think she says, she's a piece of crap. Like that's
Mhm.
how it made them out to be. And I love the way she tosses off certain lines that do make you wonder, like when she says, "What kind of person bashes their friend's knee in? Who would do that to a friend?" Just
Right.
that little trailing off at the end is such a great detail.
Hmm.
To a
Yeah. And
friend.
it's so funny. She's so good at her line deliveries. This is just, yeah. And this is where it's just, you feel like she really understands a version of Tonya Harding that the rest of us have never gotten to see. And that's what we're seeing in this film.
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting to watch her definitely try to distance herself and definitely is starting to evade, any responsibility there after the fact when, you know, I don't know if she is entirely innocent in all this, but you definitely see in her performance just the panic in the aftermath of the incident and how like any hope she had of reclaiming her image, which she's trying to do up to that point, just went down the toilet. And now it's just like in fight or flight mode ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like is before we even get to the incident, you see moments of or hints at unreliable storytelling
Yeah.
from all sides, and including things about Tonya. So there's a scene early on where it's her and Jeff, and his version of the story is that she chased him with a shotgun, and it cuts to that moment and she's got the shotgun and she's following him and she turns to the camera and says, "I never did this." And so
Yeah.
there's a, like, that's something that's established early on. So when we get to the incident and you're hearing different pieces of the story, different versions of the same story from different people, it's just interesting because it really does make it feel like I don't actually know who to believe here. I have my suspicions, but everybody's questionable. Nobody's really reliable here. And then the really telling thing about Tonya is as soon as she finds out what happened to Nancy, her concern is not about Nancy. It's about what this is going to mean for her. Is she
Exactly.
still going to be able to go to the Olympics? What is this going to do for her future?
Yeah. All that sort of self-interest ultimately,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
again is definitely a learned behavior, I think, from dealing with her mother.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely makes you contextualize exactly how this all happened. And we do have to talk about one of her most famous moments from the film, which is the mirror scene before she's about to go on at the Olympics and she's putting on her makeup and looking directly at herself slash us, and she's trying to hold back tears and trying not to break down, and she's putting on a brave face and she gives this huge kind of forced smile like she's truly like pushing through the pain. I feel like that clip I have seen over and over again ever since this movie was released, but seeing it again in context and feeling just that intense pressure of what she's going through in the lead up to that, very impactful. Really, really great work.
Yeah. It's really such a moving emotional scene for us to watch too, not just for her to experience,
Yeah.
because everything that's led up to this, she's been in the middle of a media circus for the last 6 or 8 weeks. The press have been on her lawn. Everybody's chasing her everywhere. And I mean, she cannot talk to anybody, Jeff and Sean, or she cannot talk to them. Her
Right.
mother is terrible. Like, she doesn't have a safe place to go and turn and just unload her feelings and the honest truth about what she may have participated in. She's not able to talk about this. She's had to internalize everything. And in a whole life of having to internalize everything, this is just a moment where it's too much for her and she's alone. She's alone with herself. She has to face herself in the mirror and just feel the weight of everything that's happened. And she breaks down in such a way that feels, I think this is the one scene of the entire movie where Tonya is being completely honest and completely true to herself. And it's because there's no one else around and she's not trying to impress anybody. She's not trying to convince anybody. She's just left alone with herself and having to face herself. And it's such a powerful moment.
Yeah, it really is. It does definitely feels like the most revealing moment of the film, and one that's like, it's like breaking from the sort of documentary style feel of the film at times, that I love it. And then right after that, when she's skating and she messes up because of her skate and she has this look on her face that's like she's just almost reverted back to her younger self in a way, and she's just disappointed her mother. That is very, very striking, because it's just like one thing after another for her, and then this happens, and it's just like a breaking point ultimately. But yeah, going forward all the way to the end, it's just one incredible scene after another, I think, for her. Like the courtroom scene where the judge bars her from participating in competitive skating ever again, and it just completely crushes her spirit, and she's begging the judge to send her to jail so that she can still skate, at least. Like, she'll do the time like Jeff and Sean, because for her, this feels like a worse punishment, I think, of the three of them, because Jeff and Sean only got 18 months in prison, and then they can do other things with their life. Her career, her passion, basically, is now over.
Yeah. And she even says I don't have the line written right in front of me, but she says something about this is a life sentence for her.
Yeah.
And you really feel that in the way that she is breaking down. And it doesn't feel like she's putting on the show to try to convince the judge, because so much of the time throughout everything that we've seen about her and the way that she interacts with people, it's so much of telling them what she thinks they want to hear to give her way. And this is a rare moment where, yes, she is trying to get something, but it's coming from a place of real, genuine feeling, and she's not lying. She's being completely honest. And she's also not afraid of jail time. She's probably been around people who've been in and out of jail her whole life. It's probably not something really new or unfamiliar to her. And she's totally fine with doing that, as long as this one thing, the only thing that's ever mattered to her in her life, the only thing that she's ever been good at, the only thing that's ever given her an outlet, is being taken away from her. And honestly, I mean, I have to say, I have my thoughts about Tonya Harding, but Margot Robbie in that courtroom scene convinced me, like, let the woman skate.
Yes. Leave Tonya alone. I know. Yeah, it does. Yeah. And yeah, I also just wanted to mention one other scene that I am very struck by, which is when she is sort of holding back her anger in the documentary, talking to the camera thing, of talking about how she was famous for a minute and she was loved and then she became hated, and a punchline. And she looks directly into the camera and says, it was like being abused all over again. But this time it was by you, all of you. You all were my attackers. I like just the fury that she brings to that, and the intensity, and just the way that she performs that, I've always been struck by.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, whatever people think about Tonya Harding, whatever people think or remember, in some cases falsely, like I have a lot of things that I totally misremembered about the the incident, which I was in high school when this happened. And so I remember it very well, but I remember it very incorrectly too. And like, I actually, there's something that she says about how there are people who actually think that she was the one who hit Nancy, and like I mean, I never thought that, but yeah, like there's just so much misinformation out there. And I think even though this movie still kind of it doesn't let Tonya off the hook, and it also doesn't get to the real truth of what happened. It hints at it, but it doesn't get to the real truth. But it's making a broader point in this scene specifically that you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about just these types of media sensation stories where people hear part of the story and they make so many assumptions about somebody and about their life, about who they are. And then the press, the story goes away, it changes to something else because people have such a limited attention span. And then whatever they remember about that incident becomes how they define that person.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the exact experience that Tonya Harding went through. And, she's on the cusp of Olympic greatness. She actually won a couple of medals in 92. And then, yeah, I mean, now you say Tonya Harding and people have no reverence for that name. It really is something that if they know who you're talking about, they'll either laugh about it or they'll be like, "Oh yeah, she was horrible."
Mm-hmm.
And and it's just to have that called out in such a direct way. It really was a little bit of a gut punch the first time I watched it, of like, "Oh, yeah, I was part of that."
Yep.
And that realization of every time there's a big media story like this, I'm part of the problem.
Yeah. I think this was especially the case in the 90s,
Yeah.
where this was, and we've seen so many stories of this filtered through limited series these days and all that, like the Pam and Tommy and the Lyle and Eric Menendez and OJ Simpson over and over again. We keep revisiting that,
Hmm.
and what we did to Marsha Clark. It's just,
Yeah.
there's so much of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's so true.
Something about the 90s. Bad news. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think I think part of it was just the rise of the 24-hour news
well,
cycle, and
that's
you
it.
had
Yeah.
so much that you had to fill time-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have as many streaming options as we do now, which is a whole different type of issue. And so real life was, and cameras were going into the courtrooms, and real life became sort of the thing that people streamed all day long because
Yep.
it was available. It was what we had. So yeah. And it ruined a lot of lives.
Mm-hmm. Especially women. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Anything else on Margot Robbie and I, Tanya?
Mm, no, I think I've
I
said
think we
everything I
said
have
quite a
to say
bit
about
there.
that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
So, yes. All right. Let's move on to Saoirse Ronan in Lady Bird. Okay. So, Saoirse getting her third Oscar nomination here for Lady Bird, 2 years after Brooklyn. Not a whole lot to update on in between those two nominations, other than to say that she did make her Broadway debut in The Crucible in 2016. And in 2017, in addition to Lady Bird, she lent her voice to the animated film Loving Vincent. So that's pretty much it. But for Lady Bird, this is Greta Gerwig's solo directorial debut, and she was a little bit dubious at first when her producer suggested Saoirse Ronan for the lead role, kind of not knowing if she could pull off the accent that was needed, but they met at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2015 and read through the script together, and Greta said she knew immediately that it had to be Saoirse in the role. So, the film is very, very loosely semi autobiographical and takes place in 2002 in Sacramento, California. Saoirse plays Christine McPherson, who prefers to go by Lady Bird. Thank you very much. And she is an outgoing but somewhat unpopular senior at a Catholic high school. She has her best friend, Julie Beanie Feldstein, whom she spends all her time with until she starts taking an interest in Danny, Lucas Hedges, and eventually Kyle, Timothy Chalamet, and has ultimately unsuccessful relationships with them. And she tries to fit in with the cool crowd, kind of leaving Julie behind in the process. And meanwhile, Lady Bird has a strained relationship with her mother, Marion, Laurie Metcalf, who they love each other, but don't particularly maybe have a strong liking for each other at times. And Marion struggles to understand her daughter, who wishes to go far away to the East Coast for college to live a more exciting life. So, yes, this is a big one for me. I don't know about you, but curious for your thoughts on Saoirse overall and her first big collaboration with Greta Gerwig here.
I love Saoirse Ronan. I really do. I mean, we all know she's
I mean,
insanely
yeah.
talented. She
Yeah.
got her first nomination when she was what, 13?
Yep.
And yeah, she's incredible. One of the things I love about her too is that she doesn't take herself too seriously. When she went and hosted
Mhm.
SNL, I was just like, and I mean, she's in a lot of independent or smaller budget movies. She's not a big mainstream actress, and yet so many people know and love her and will go see movies just because she's in them.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's just such star power. And seeing her, like it honestly, seeing her in this movie, it feels like she and Greta Gerwig were made for each other, you know. There's
Yep.
just something about what the two of them are able to do. I'm in the minority. I didn't love Little Women, but part of that is because the 1994 is my movie. Like
Yeah.
that is my Little Women.
Right.
Um, but even as much as I had some tiny little baby issues with that adaptation, I loved Saoirse in that
Mhm.
movie.
Right.
And she's just great. And even the movies that she doesn't get nominated for, she is fantastic in everything. I love it when she shows up in a Wes Anderson movie. I
Yeah.
just I she's great and I would love to hang out with her.
She seems like a fun hang, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. She really does. And yeah, and then specifically getting into Lady Bird, I mean, my experiences at this age are different from hers, but yet there's such a relatability. And that one of the things that I love the most about Lady Bird is how much I feel like her experience reflects the one that I had and who I felt how disconnected I felt from the life I was in when I was in my senior year of high school too, and just feeling like I had all these dreams and ambitions, but I didn't have the ability to pull it off. And my mom was much more encouraging than than hers is, but also without the ability to actually push me in any meaningful direction. So
Yeah.
I was still getting a lot of like, okay, let's be realistic here.
Mm,
And so yeah, so I never applied to NYU, but
mm. That's
that's
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably for the best. But anyway, I love Lady Bird because I feel like I mean, coming of age stories for girls are still so rare. We're getting more of them, but especially by 2017, we didn't have very many to look at and to compare them to. And it's such a special time capsule of a movie with this like interesting, like the world was kind of changed by 2002, but we didn't know how much it was going to change within the next 15 years. But then also just this really lovely look at a very specific type of story and a very specific type of girl living in that time period too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love Lady Bird. Love Greta Gerwig, love her films. And I love the empathy she has with her films, you know, and it's all right here in this debut, which definitely could have felt like standard coming of age story in a way, but it's so well written. All of the character work is so well drawn here and so specific, very observational, which I love. And yeah, like you said, Saoirse really is just this perfect collaborator for Greta because of how she's able to blend those great comedic skills that Saoirse has with the more dramatic depth underneath that and bring so much complexity to a character who can be very bratty at times and not always the easiest to root for, maybe, but you do anyway because it's Saoirse and because she just brings this perfect sensibility of feeling mature and cultured for her age, but also still being immature within that. I think that is a very specific time, and it can be for boys or girls, honestly, of feeling like you want to escape your hometown. You think you're, you know, this more advanced person, even though you don't really know exactly what you're doing necessarily, but you think you do, and you think you would if you were on your own. I think that specific sensibility of being 17, for example, is just like perfectly captured here by Saoirse.
Yeah. One of the things I love about Lady Bird as a character too, though, is as much as she is so headstrong and so convinced that she's right about things or that she knows what she wants, she also has a lot of moments where that's very clear that she actually does not know what she's doing and she doesn't know what she wants. And,
Right.
like she casts her best friend aside so that she can hang out with this popular girl. And they don't have anything in common. These two don't need to be friends. And but yet she's willing to let go of somebody who really matters to her just for this opportunity to hang out with these supposed cool kids, and it's like, why would she do that? I don't know. But it's because she really isn't so sure of who she is, and she's still looking for places to belong because she knows she doesn't belong where she's at. She feels very much like she's on the outside, and she's just looking for any opportunity to feel like she's with her people, she belongs. And the what she eventually needs to learn is that you don't just find a place that you belong, you make that place where you belong. I don't
Right.
know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. I think,
yeah, like
yeah.
you bloom where you planted, basically.
There you go. Yes. And she is very adaptable in that way, even if it is very apparent that she does not belong with the popular crowd and she does not belong with Kyle, even though he seems so cool and, cultured and everything she wants to be a
Oh,
part of, but he's actually just a douche at the end of the day. But just the way that she adapts and molds herself to other people, I think is just so smart and just so, like, Saoirse has always been very adaptable herself in that way, which I think is what makes her the perfect casting for this. And that's not even getting into this incredibly complex relationship of her and her mother and the way that that feels immediately authentic and lived in the very first scene of them in the car together in that argument. I love and have watched many times. I don't know about you, but it's just the perfect opener for that relationship of Marion being very, overprotective and openly critical of her daughter's choices, and Lady Bird being kind of bratty and desperately wanting to leave. I just love the stubbornness in her very pointed tone about like wanting to go to the East Coast or, New York or at least Connecticut or New Hampshire where writers live in the woods. Just they play
yeah.
off each other so naturally, and it is also clear that she is very much her mother's daughter, because of how
Mm-hmm.
stubborn they both are. And ironically, they are too stubborn to really express that or put aside those differences and acknowledge that.
Yeah. The relationship between a mother and a daughter is such an interesting one. And I mean, I don't have any kids. I don't have a daughter of my own, but I do have a mother and
Mm-hmm.
we are close. And honestly, the relationship between Lady Bird and her mom throughout this just felt so much like the one that I had with my mom, especially at that time in my life. And one that I've watched some of my friends have with their own kids now too, where it's like you have Laurie Metcalf, who also phenomenal performance
Mm-hmm.
from her too, but you can see in her Marion that she's coming from a place of like, listen, kid, I've lived this life. I know things aren't going to turn out the way that you want them to, but she doesn't fully understand, I think, that as a mom she can't just tell her teenage daughter what's what and have her kid believe her, like
Right.
she's just as much as Ladybird is learning her place in the world and trying to figure out who she really wants to be, her mother is trying to figure out how to parent somebody like that who's right on the cusp and trying to figure this out. And and just watching the two of them together trying to figure out this weird different new place that they are in their own mother-daughter relationship. It's really fun to watch them every time they have scenes together, especially the scenes where they're arguing with each other. It's so fun to watch because for myself, as I said, this reminds me so much of my own relationship with my mom. I'm watching this going like, oh, ladies, you're going to figure this out and things are going to be so good in about 10 years. Like you're going to
Right.
be best friends.
Yes. Yeah. You
Yeah.
have to go through this phase to get to the other
Mm-hmm.
side of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on too, where like they have that scene of them picking out prom dresses for Lady
Mm-hmm.
Bird, and she's opening up about wishing that her mom liked her And Marion says, I love you, which is very different than what Lady Bird said, and how I want you to be the very best version of yourself that you could be and all that, which is still not saying that she likes her. But, when she does look her mom in the eye and says, what if this is the best version? It always kills me. It's just such a vulnerable delivery in that moment of her actually being authentic and wanting desperately to form that connection or rebuild the connection at least.
There's a couple of things I love in that scene. One of them is that I don't think Marion has actually stopped to consider whether she likes her kid until her kid asks her.
Yeah.
I don't think she's even thought about it, because I don't think she considers it her job to like Lady Bird, who she keeps calling Christine.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't think that's really occurred to her as something that's part of the package. She has a job to do, which is to raise this kid, make her the best adult, and set her up for as good of a life as she can hope to have. And beyond that, everything else is just kind of, not important. And so when Lady Bird asks her that, do you like me? I think it surprises her, because she doesn't really know how to answer, because she hasn't thought about it, because this isn't someone that she would pal around with if she didn't have to,
Right.
At this point. They will get there. I truly believe that. But right now, no. And the thing is, that's actually a really great mother moment for Marion too, because her job isn't to be her kid's friend. Her job is to raise her. And so she's doing it right. Even if she feels sometimes like she's failing, she's doing what she's supposed to do. And so I really love that they drive that home in that scene. And then yeah, for Lady Bird to just kind of just say it so sensitively of, what if this is the best version of me? You really do sense that there's some fear in that of, what if I can't be better than this? And she really means that. This is one of those rare moments where she's saying something back to her mother that's not about trying to cut her, trying to make a point. She's actually genuinely, sincerely concerned about that maybe this is the best it's going to be for me. Is this acceptable to you? And she's really worried that it's not.
Yeah. And she's really the only person she can truly open up to, I think, about that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I just love all those moments of her hoping for people to pay attention to her. I think they're so effective, the comedic ones and the dramatic ones, even like when she's turning 18 and she's buying cigarettes and a Playgirl, and she wants desperately for the attendant to acknowledge that she's 18 and that it's her birthday. Or even later on, like I said, just the more dramatic, like wanting her mother to go with her to see her off at the airport, and she just won't get out of the car. And just all those little unspoken gestures in trying to get other people to sort of reach out and connect with her and make her feel accepted and loved and special are so vulnerable, so specific, and just very finely detailed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and she's a girl who she's from a middle class family, but it's lower middle class. They don't have a big fancy house. Her dad has been working, both of her parents work. She has a brother who are they married? I can't remember now. Or live-in girlfriend. I think they're married. But yeah, and so she's just kind of, and she's the younger sister, and like there's just so much of her life where it's just none of it's going the way she wants to. She doesn't get all the fancy things, and she doesn't, even though she goes to a small school, everybody knows everybody, she's not the popular girl. And yet, yeah, she's always trying to find some way to and I don't know if she's always been that way, or if it's just sort of this, I'm about to be an adult and I have to like, my life is supposed to look a certain way, and it doesn't. And so it's just interesting watching her navigate that.
Right. And even the scene where she and Kyle have sex for the first time, and she's so excited to have this special experience, only for him to, finish early at him revealing that he's not actually a virgin, that they didn't actually lose their virginities together. A very humbling experience, because she wanted it to be special, and it's this sort of heartbreaking moment for her, because She is someone who really values those big life events, I think, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to be so mediocre, it's a letdown, especially with how cavalier he is about all of it and saying, like, you're going to have so much, unspectacular sex in your life and all this stuff, and brings up the Iraq War. And she's like, different things can be sad. It's not all war.
Right.
I love
Yeah.
that line reading.
Yeah. And it's like, sure, it's easy for him to blow that off as not special because for him it's
Right.
not special, but it is
Right.
supposed to be something for her. And it is
Mm-hmm.
something that she spends a lot of time thinking about this. So
Oh, yeah.
just as a side note here with Kyle and Danny,
Mm.
someone I heard someone compare a couple years later, movies they were in. Someone said that Boy Erased is the sequel for Danny's character,
Oh,
and Beautiful Boy is the sequel for Kyle's character. And I was just like, okay, that's
wow.
weird, but kind of
Wow.
not untrue.
Dark.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Hopefully that's not the future Danny had for himself. But Kyle, I don't know. I
Yeah.
could see it.
Yeah. And then, just to speak to the ending, which I find very effective when she is in New York and is clearly having these sort of pains of homesickness. It's definitely harkening back to Brooklyn, her performance in Brooklyn and what she's communicating in that film. But there's just a real remorse in a way and almost a guilt on her face in realizing just how much her mother cared for her ultimately. And it's only with the benefit of distance, I think, that she's able to recognize that, which is, again, very true to life and a very observational moment in a film full of observational moments of just her finally being able to have some bigger perspective on this and just be separated from her mother finally.
It's the distance. It's also the fact that everything isn't rosy and perfect just because,
Exactly.
she got what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
She gets to go to New York, which is where she wants to be. And that is wonderful. And she's excited, but, pretty immediately she's realizing that, the version of this that she had in her head is not reality.
Mm-hmm.
And she ends up getting way too drunk at a party, ends up in the ER, is walking home, the next day just trashed and just thinking, what is this? This isn't what I thought I was getting myself into. And the thing is that what I appreciate is there's not a sense of like her calling her parents, I want to come home, I made a mistake, but it's just that recognition of, okay, maybe my mom wasn't so dumb. Maybe she knew
Right.
some things about me that I didn't know myself. And part of what helps her get there too is that her father, who's also wonderful. I love Tracy Letts
Tracy
and I
Letts.
love his character in this.
Yeah.
But the fact that he slipped into her suitcase all of the versions of the goodbye letter that her mother was trying to write to her, that it seems like she never finished any version and never gave her anything.
Yeah.
And he gives her
There
all
is
of
no
the
best
drafts of
version
it.
of this letter.
Yeah. And for her to just sit and have this moment and read through them and realize that her mother really does love her and care for her, and not just because she has to, but because she just does. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's just such a beautiful moment for her to recognize that. And it's more powerful that it comes in a way that her mom doesn't even know is happening. Her mom has
Yeah.
no idea that she has those letters. And for her to just have this moment, and she grows up a lot right there. And that's going to connect them in a way that a poignant conversation couldn't.
Right.
So.
I know. And that's the whole reason why she was trying to write this letter, is that she felt she didn't have the words,
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe later on we'll see Lady Bird the college years and we'll just check in with this bunch again. Because I just love these characters. I just I wish we could see more from them. And that does speak to Greta's writing, I think, is that this is something I really picked up on in the first watch, even, and my many rewatches have felt this way, is that every single character is so fully formed to the point that you could see any of them being their own story ultimately. Even people like Stephen McKinley Henderson being like, talking about the play and how they didn't understand it. Like there's such a whole story to that character too that's just so specific. It's not just everyone's orbiting around Lady Bird because she's the main character. Everyone feels very specific.
Yeah.
Just to speak overall to it.
Yeah. Even smaller characters like the girl Jenna, who is the popular girl that Lady Bird wants to become friends with and does for a while. With Jenna, it's like, Lady Bird doesn't want Jenna to know where she really lives, and so she lies about the house that she lives in and everything. And even with someone like Jenna, who we would just write off as being, kind of conceited or having these expectations, she's upset that Lady Bird lied to her, not about what her actual circumstances are. And that's why she's just like, you're weird. I don't want anything to do with this because you can't even tell that. Like, why would you lie to me about that?
Right. And you can see everyone's perspective on it. And you can feel a certain way about Lady Bird when she does things like that. So, yeah, it's just brilliant writing.
It really is.
So I feel like that was mostly about Lady Bird itself, but Saoirse truly is so like born for this type of role in general. And this is just the perfect encapsulation, I think, of her talent.
I think it's a mark of a really good performance and a good script when you can look at a movie like this and think, I cannot picture somebody else playing this role at all. Not even just better. Like I can't picture anybody else playing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with that, cannot wait to see her next collaboration in a few episodes and talk about that one as well with Greta. So with that, let's move on to our final losing nominee. And it's a big one, Meryl Streep in The Post. Here we are, folks. The final, as of now, Oscar nomination for Meryl Streep. Her 21st nomination, 17th in Best Actress. Just a remarkable run that will probably never be topped, at least in our lifetimes. We last talked about
maybe
her.
Saoirse.
Maybe Saoirse. Maybe she's the one. Yes, maybe. But she's still young, so it's possible. We last talked about her only last week with Florence Foster Jenkins. But in between these two nominations, she actually won another Emmy, just casually, for her narration on Five Came Back. So, not too shabby. But with The Post, this is a Steven Spielberg film, and we haven't talked about one of his films in this category since The Color Purple from 1985. Not that there are many options for, female leads in between, but still worth noting. The Post is a collaboration of some of the biggest power players in Hollywood, Steven Spielberg, Amy Pascal, Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep. And it's about the publishing of the Pentagon Papers, which detailed America's true involvement in the Vietnam War and the government sort of deceiving the public about its purposes and the full extent of the attacks that went unreported in the media. So the film is about the editorial board of the Washington Post in 1971, struggling over how and whether to publish the story, focusing especially on Katharine Graham, Meryl Streep, the owner and publisher of the Post, who often struggles to be taken seriously in a predominantly male workforce, and how she reconciles her friendship with various influential members of society and government with the desire to have a quality newspaper that reports the truth. So, this is a very big occasion, Karen, that you're here for this most recent Meryl Streep nomination. Quite a journey to get here. But tell me your thoughts overall on Meryl, her legacy, and her nomination here.
Oh my gosh. I mean, where do we even start?
Exactly.
I love Meryl Streep. She is one of the greatest ever for a reason. And I do think she's going to get that fourth Oscar someday. I don't know. But we'll see. But yeah, when I look at her career, and I mean, obviously going back into the 70s, and when I look at some of the films that have really just define who she is. I mean, what can you say? I mean, you've actually gotten to say a lot about her, but
I know.
But
oh my God.
yeah. And some of those nominations are a little bit like, really, but
Fair.
but some of them are so deserved and just she's inspiring. And what I think is so funny is in her later career, just watching her be kind of like, not unappreciative, but kind of nonchalant about it, more
Yeah.
of just like, oh, okay, well, we're doing this again, I guess. And
Hmm.
but also I look at someone like her, well, I look at her and I think about, you know, I don't think that many people in Hollywood set out to take on a specific role because this might translate to Oscars. And I especially think that's true of her. She's just so good and so it has been so consistently good over her career that she just has had so many roles that were undeniable. You have to recognize the talent that she presents. In some more recent things, I think that we're seeing less of that, but I think things like Only Murders in the Building
Mm.
prove that she still has it.
Oh yeah.
She's still very, very talented. And yeah, I don't even know what else to say. I mean, she's Meryl.
Meryl is Meryl.
Yeah,
Yes. But what about
yeah.
the post?
What about The Post? Okay, so this is another movie that I have not seen since 2017.
Hmm.
And I remember liking it. I think that it kind of I don't really know what happened with the movie. When it came out, I think it got kind of outshined by some other bigger, it's weird to say that about a Spielberg movie, I guess, but some other bigger, more buzzy movies. I mean, who really wanted to think about the Vietnam War and journalism in
Hmm.
2017?
Yeah.
And even though it was an exceptionally relevant and timely film when it came out, but watching it again this week, I was just like, man, this is also really timely now. And I'm really glad I'm revisiting this now. And I
Hmm.
think as a movie, I think there's some things about it that are a little bit, could be stronger. And I think that's even true of her character, because I think that what we see with her as Kay Graham, there is strength there, but there's also a lot of deferring to the men around her more than I wish that there was. And I don't
Hmm.
know how much of that is accurate and how much of that is just the way that the character's written. I really don't know where that lies, but I think that she's very good, and I think she has some moments that are really powerful.
Hmm.
And yeah, I enjoy watching her in this movie. I'm glad I got to visit it again this week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I first of all mixed feelings on this being the end of this Meryl Streep journey, at least for now, because seems like just yesterday, Cody and I were discussing her work in The French Lieutenant's Woman, and to be here talking about this 17th nomination in lead, it just went by very fast, you know. And I'm gonna miss talking about her in a way because she has just been such a mainstay. It's like when I had to say goodbye to Katharine Hepburn or Betty Davis, you know. She's just been a part of this for so long. At the same time, I do like talking about different actresses, so happy we can get that opportunity moving forward. But also very happy to end here with this nomination because for me, this single handedly saves her nomination run in the 2010s for me, which has been
Yeah.
my least favorite of her nominations by far this era. But this is her best nomination, I think, since like Julie and Julia, honestly. And I think it's because she's working with a great director and is in a role that really fits her so well and doesn't feel as much like she's putting on a wig and doing an accent and that's it. Like, this is very detailed character work that she's doing here. I will say something I did notice on this rewatch is some of her line delivery. She has a tiny bit of the same style and delivery of the Iron Lady, like the slightly affected tone, the sort of head tilt forward as she's speaking. I saw a little bit of Margaret Thatcher in there at times, but thankfully this is a more thoughtful film and characterization than that is. And she, I think, really communicates this feeling of being kind of still uncertain of exactly how she wants to be in this position. And she has this slightly sort of harried feeling at times, and like the mental strain of being in this position and how she is frequently undermined and not taken seriously even with her sort of trusted managing editor, Ben Bradley, and their breakfast and like his assistants in the beginning, like they have to cover the president's daughter's wedding, and she's pushing back on it. And she's like about to lose her temper, but then she restrains herself, and all that sort of simmering tension that she has when she wants to sort of be a more boisterous person, but then she knows the sort of era that they're in. She knows the sentiment of these men, so she has to kind of tamp things down. Otherwise, she'll be just not taken seriously or seen as too emotional, quote unquote. I definitely get all of that from the performance. That feeling of like not always knowing exactly how to cut through the sexism and still get her point made and affected.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about Kay Graham at this point too, and what I think Meryl gives us is the fact that not only does she have a lot of things that she wishes that she could say and knows that she probably can't, but also part of the reason that she can't is because they're on the cusp of this big financial matter too,
Right.
and taking the post public and national, turning it into something much bigger than it currently is. And she's in this very precarious situation that probably her husband wouldn't have had to be as careful, just because, he's a man. But because he died, and because this is now in her hands, the world looks at her much differently than they would have looked at him. And she understands that there's this different level of responsibility that she has to the paper, to the legacy that her husband left, and to all the people that stand to benefit or lose based on what she does. And so I think that there's a lot of that really sewn into the performance that we see here.
Yeah. And it's also really fascinating to see her kind of reckoning with her personal relationships and those attachments in her social circle, and how to square that with trying to speak truth to power and lead with, quality and integrity, and how she can't really have both. Like, you can't really be hosting parties with the Secretary of Defense and calling him an old friend and assuming there won't be some sort of quid pro quo there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, her and Ben Bradley have this great discussion about that, where he's pushing her to use her connection with him, the Secretary of Defense, but she won't do it. She won't cross that line. And he keeps prodding her, and you can sort of see her mind working because she's genuinely conflicted about it. But then in that same scene, she's kind of shooting it right back to him, talking about how Ben was so chummy with JFK, and like she says, hard to believe you wouldn't have gotten some of those invitations if you didn't pull a few punches, which is just a good piece of writing because it shows she is more observant also than people think. And it also shows how she thinks he assumes that she's weak and isn't willing to risk personal relationships, but he's just as guilty of it. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And I think that that's a really important point because I think that what a lot of the men around her are trying to say and is basically that, like, oh, well, you're just not willing to damage these friendships because you're a woman. And that conversation that she has with Ben makes the point of, no, this is just because of the types of relationships that we have. And maybe those relationships, when you're trying to run a newspaper and trying to be tasked with and entrusted with the truth and giving the people, all the information, maybe these types of relationships really shouldn't be happening. And maybe that's part of the problem. And it's not a gender thing. Men are just as guilty of that as women are.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And it's just interesting because when Ben does inform her that, like, they've gained access to these papers, she does play it with a little bit of anxiety and dread, almost, like knowing what position this puts her in, because there's also this threat of injunction. And as she says, I think at one point, like, they may not have a paper if they go through with this story, because, like you said, there's also this whole threat of the paper needing to go public and all that. And it's just a lot more complicated to finesse this with the right approach than people might think, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, but there's so much strength and power. And I love that Sarah Paulson even gets to have that conversation as
Yeah.
Ben's wife, who, I mean, it's an underwritten role, but
She
whatever.
is the wife. Yes.
Yes, she very much is the wife.
Yeah.
But that moment that she gets to explain to him, her husband, why what Kay did was way more brave than anything that he has done. He needs to hear that from someone other than Kay herself, and it's something that he's not gonna just come to that conclusion on his own. And she's absolutely right. I mean, this is something that Kay made the decision to risk her business, to risk everything, because she knew it was the right thing to do. She didn't know how it was going to turn out. She didn't know what the fallout would be, or whether this would work, but she ultimately, I think, because she's been surrounded by all these men with all these opinions telling her what's right, I think that at some point she did start to understand what her responsibility was in all this, and she was willing to actually take that stand and do it. And what I love too is that she didn't need to wait around for someone else to give her permission. She was the one who had to give permission. And just watching Meryl go through that emotional journey, like she's having conversations, but she's also dealing with a lot of this and showing a lot of this thought and emotion on her face. It's not even things that she's always verbalizing. And I think that there's a lot of really good, subtle performing here. It's not a big showy role like some other ones are, and yet it's also very powerful.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the best example of that is when she is making that decision to publish the story, and the whole build up to that, and listening to all those people on the phone and their opinions, and the way that like Spielberg pushes in on this huge close up, and you see her making those mental calculations of here are the pros, here are the cons, and she almost has tears in her eyes. Like, it's just such a loaded moment for her. But then she finally says, let's do it. Let's go. Let's publish. And it's sort of uncertain in that kind of like stammering she has in that moment. But she knows that this is what's right to take this calculated risk ultimately.
Yeah. And once she makes that decision, she's not going to be convinced to undo it. The decision is made. It's done. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And I love the scene where she's talking to her daughter toward the end and really is opening up about how like she didn't even question it when she was younger, and her father assigned her husband to be his successor as the owner of the paper, and how she never even really had a job until she was in her 40s, and how her whole life changed after her husband died, and now she's in this position and she just wants to preserve the legacy of the paper, and also by association protect her father's legacy, and she doesn't want to let people down. And she starts to tear up in a way that actually really shocked me in terms of how effective it was. It's the kind of thing where like, this is my 17th Meryl performance I'm talking about, and I thought I'd sort of seen it all and gotten used to all the tics and the mannerisms and all her habits as an actress. But then she goes ahead and just like taps into something very new, I think, and very vulnerable that I didn't really see coming.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if some of that is the fact that she's playing a real person who really did go through this experience.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not it at all, but there's just this raw realness to her version of Kay Graham that sets her apart from so many other characters that she's played. And I'm really glad. I don't think this is the last time she's ever getting nominated for an Oscar, but I'm glad that, like you said, this is so much better of a note to end on than like her last one.
Yes, we can say it. Florence Foster Jenkins would not be a great one to end on. I will agree.
No,
yes.
No.
And I think she would probably agree too.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
I think that's true. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just think this is such a thoughtful performance that does go a little bit underrated in terms of her overall filmography. As much as you can say an Oscar nominated performance is underrated, I still think this is just like one of those things that reminds you of her brilliance, and that,
Yeah.
it's not just the Florence Foster Jenkins and the August Osage County and the Iron Lady, which are all kind of fun, and she's doing big things there. This just feels a little bit more getting back to the roots of her true brilliance for me.
Absolutely. And I feel like this, I mean, there were some really great acting performances in 2017. It wasn't, nobody was guaranteed as well. Maybe one person was guaranteed a spot in that lineup. But really it was, there were other performances
There
that
were
easily
options.
could have been
Yeah.
there. Yeah, there
Mhm.
were. And this very much feels like it wasn't just, oh, we're holding a place for Meryl. It
Right.
didn't feel like, well, obviously she's getting nominated. It really felt like she earned that spot, and it really is. It's great, and getting to see her, in a Spielberg film, and
Right.
doing great scenes with Tom Hanks, but also with a lot of other people, like great scene partners, and she just, yeah, it really is. It's a great performance that absolutely deserved recognition.
Amen. Yeah. And also, fun fact, the first time she was nominated for a film that was also nominated for Best Picture since Out of Africa,
I
which
mean,
is
is
so
that really a
wild.
fun fact?
I don't know. It is a fact.
I do
Notable
love that.
fact.
Yeah, I do love that she would end up in a movie with Saoirse
Yes, she
not too
would.
long after this.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Shall we get to our winner?
let's do.
Frances McDormand in Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. All right. So Frances wins her second Oscar here for Three Billboards, 21 years after her first win in this category for Fargo. And that was the last time she was even nominated in this category. So there's a lot to update in between those two wins. So after her first win, she actually did quite a few supporting roles in films like Paradise Road, Wonder Boys, The Man Who Wasn't There, Something's Gotta Give. She got a pair of supporting actress Oscar nominations for Almost Famous and North Country, and she continued in supporting roles for a while, but she also took on some more leading roles in films like Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day and Burn After Reading. And on television, she produced and starred in a miniseries adaptation of Olive Kitteridge, which was very acclaimed and earned her an Emmy for acting and producing. So, and also, meanwhile, in between all that, she's on the stage winning a Tony Award for Good People in 2011, which does mean she has the triple crown of acting, Emmy, Oscar, Tony. So now she just has to record an audiobook and we can get a full EGOT. But now we get to Three Billboards, which is written and directed by Martin McDonagh, and he wrote the lead character of Mildred with Frances in mind. She felt that she was a little too old for the role, but she eventually agreed to it. The film is a black comedy drama about a tough Missouri woman named Mildred, played by Frances, who is grieving over the rape and murder of her daughter Angela and feels resentment toward the local police department for not making any progress on finding the culprit after 8 months. So she decides to put up 3 billboards, which read, "Raped while dying," and "Still no arrests. How come, Chief Willoughby?" And that gets the attention of Chief Willoughby, Woody Harrelson, as well as Officer Dixon, Sam Rockwell, who don't exactly take kindly to the message. And it becomes an ongoing conflict between Mildred and the police department, and she becomes a bit of a pariah in town as things escalate further into violence. So, thoughts on Frances McDormand overall and her second, not even most recent, but second Oscar-winning performance here.
Well, I love Frances McDormand. I mean, I loved her in Fargo. I loved her in even movies before that. She's just one that is always
again, I mean, I think we've said this about everybody we've talked about today, but she's one that every time she shows up in a movie, I'm like, all right, what is she gonna do? What is she bringing to us this time? Even
Yep.
in very small roles, she's consistently interesting, often great as well.
Yes.
And I really like just the wide range of movies that she's been in. She's done a lot of, small indie dramas. She's done some big sci-fi. She's done, she's worked with the Coen brothers, obviously, and she's worked with, just such a range of directors and interesting directors. And it's just been fun to watch her career. Specifically in 2017, I remember at the time I was writing for Award Circuit. I was on that podcast and everything. And I remember the conversation well before the season, well, as the season was getting underway, but well before even precursors, I think, started rolling out. And we were talking about, could Frances McDormand possibly win another Oscar? And I was the only one of that group that was like, yes, absolutely. I think it's going to happen.
Wow.
And yeah. And it was because at the time it did feel so unusual. It had been over 20 years since her previous win. And you had the young ingenues and in that era and
Yep.
a couple that were going to be nominated this time or could have been, there were obviously other choices, and there were other veterans as well. But I don't know, the first time I watched Three Billboards, and this is not anything to do with my opinion of the movie itself, but I mean, she just owns the screen, and she just she commands every scene that she's in. And it's also definitely, of these five, it's the loudest performance for sure. But I remember I didn't even see it at a press screening. I saw it just at a theater, and it was like on a Saturday afternoon, and the theater was probably about half full, which was surprising for where I was at in the time of day. But I remember her big monologue that happens kind of early on with the when the priest comes to visit, and she just tells him off. And there was this old man, probably toward the front of the theater, who started cheering at the end of that speech. And he was just like, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And I was just like,
Oh my God.
okay, that's a reaction.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't necessarily feel what he was feeling, but the way that he reacted to it, why that caught me, besides the fact that it was kind of funny and out of nowhere, the reason that really, I took notice of it was because at the time, that really did feel like a reflection of your average Academy voter. And I thought, okay, if this person is reacting to this character in this way, that's something I need to watch out for. And so throughout the season leading up to the Oscars, it just felt like every conversation I was in, every awards event I went to that year, she was all anybody was talking about. And it just felt so inevitable to me that she would win. So it didn't even, at a certain point, it didn't even matter to me what I felt about her performance or about the movie. It was just like, yeah, of course she's going to win. And it was really funny how surprised some people were when that happened, including people on the staff of Award Circuit who were just like, wow, I just didn't see that coming. And I was just like, this just always felt inevitable to me. I always thought eventually she would win another Oscar. And when this season happened, it was just like, yeah, I'm not at all surprised. I don't know. But the movie itself and her role in it, I think her character as Mildred. Sorry, I've been talking a lot. I should let you take a turn.
No,
But
yes. I want to know what your actual thoughts are.
my actual thoughts of the movie. I don't enjoy the movie that much. I don't think it's as bad as some people think, and I don't think it's as good as others do. I'm right in the middle on it. I think that it does have some good qualities. It's my feelings on Three Billboards is it's complicated, really. And my opinion of Frances McDormand in this role is also complicated, but I don't think it's because of her performance. I think it's because of the way the character is written.
Yeah.
she is this grieving mother who's been through just the worst kind of tragedy. And I think on that, Frances sells it very well. I think that she does a good job of embodying this type of person who weirdly also just has so much care and compassion, even for people who don't deserve it. And that's where I really admire her work, but I also question some things in the script. And we'll talk about some of the specific moments, I think, but yeah, overall, I think that she did the best performance that anybody could have with the character that is on the page.
Yeah. I think I would generally agree with that sentiment as well. I love Frances. I love her screen presence. She is so one of a kind and badass. And I feel like post Fargo, she did a lot of good work. But as strange as it is to say, it feels like this era is where she really, really came into her own. This era of her career, which I would sort of define as like Olive Kitteridge to now, basically, where she's just become such a powerful force in the industry, and at an age where actresses aren't always afforded those kind of opportunities and influence. And so I kind of want to start my thoughts on this by just noting that I love Olive Kitteridge, and I think that is one of the best TV performances in recent years for me. And playing a woman there who is very difficult to love, but finding the humanity underneath all of that, hard shell ultimately that she puts up in that series, it's just beautiful work. So having that in mind, when I saw Three Billboards a few years later, I felt like this is a very good performance and it's very in her wheelhouse. But it felt a little bit like a retread of Olive Kitteridge in terms of playing an older woman in a small town who isn't always easy to love, kind of grumpy, and like these two projects have very different sensibilities, obviously, but it just didn't feel as much of like this exciting revelation necessarily, because I just felt like I had seen something similar and better just a few years earlier. So I still think she is very good and the very clear MVP of this movie, and she is so in her element. But I think I kind of agree that just the writing here is so messy, and the film doesn't really work for me on the whole, that it's just hard for me to get too excited about it compared to her other work.
Yeah.
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 I don't know if you've seen Olive Kitteridge, but
it's been a long time, but yeah.
It's been 10 years.
Yeah, it's probably been 10 years since I saw it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy that she does kind of inhabit this very like Western, almost like anti-hero role. Like the way that she, like her posture, the way she walks into certain rooms, like even like with the advertising company building and like talking tough and like no bullshit, just being very direct with what she wants and how she wants it, making sure she can say her message and like knowing what words she can or can't use. She's got on her jumpsuit and her bandana. It's like her uniform. And I think all of that just fits her like a glove. Like it doesn't feel like posturing at all, where it very much could have been in the hands of another actress. It's just like her through and through. And she's got this like slightly smug look to her in a lot of it. Just that sly little Frances McDormand smile that she has sometimes. But it's, it's what the script calls for. And she has so much fury in her eyes and in her sort of scowls that it's just like there's very little fear there, even when she's confronting the police, pretty much in any context, because she's just so spent with her grief and she doesn't care about these niceties at all. And she's going up against these macho guys and she knows she needs to sort of match them with an even more alpha energy than they have. So I guess by the end of it, I just feel like she just inhabits it so well that sometimes it doesn't feel how like much of a stretch, because it just feels like this is Frances being Frances. But also we have like Katharine Hepburn being Katharine Hepburn, and I still didn't find her to be just like, an easy actress who only played herself. Like she had her talents as well as Frances does, even if she is sort of playing a version of herself ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about Mildred, and I think what Frances really does a good job of driving home, is that the worst possible thing that could happen to her has already happened to her. She has nothing
Yeah.
to lose. Even the fact that she has another child, her son is right there. But she's lost her daughter in the most horrific way. Why does she have anything else left to be afraid of? All she wants is to have some justice. And what I think is interesting about the movie is that it's really not about her daughter and it's not about the crime. It's about
Hmm.
what she's trying to do about it and how her actions kind of drive a wedge through the town. So it's and that's part of where I actually have a little bit of a struggle with the movie itself, is that I think that the real crime is, it takes a back seat, but then they try to like bring it back in to be front and center at a certain point too, and it's like I don't feel like all of that works together very well. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. We get that flashback to their last conversation together, her and her daughter, which is this argument that culminates in Angela, her daughter, saying she hopes she gets raped on the way to school, and Mildred yells that she hopes she gets raped too, which I think is rather on the nose and not exactly subtle. But, you know, I guess you could say it adds some shadings to how part of the determination she has here is also to help her do something with this guilt that she felt over saying that and having this fractured relationship with her.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't even just that that was the last thing she said to her daughter before that actually happened to her and she died. It was also the fact that she wouldn't let her take the car either and was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
walk, and it
right.
was the totality of it. But
Hmm.
I'm with you, that conversation. And even though I have actually seen some of my friends and their moms be in, yelling matches like that. And I've seen that kind of language be said.
Yeah.
And it's horrifying, but it's just interesting to step back and look at that conversation and what that shows us about their relationship in the same year where we also have these moments with other mothers and daughters.
Yeah.
and and how there's just more, not subtlety, but just more nuance to those conversations. And
Hmm.
that's, again, my problem with Three Billboards really is the script. It's not in the performances themselves. And I think that's a perfect example of one where I'm like, oh, this could have been handled in such a more interesting way. But I think that what McDormand does with that scene, and then how she uses that scene in other elements of the film and in her performance, it really does, like you said, I mean, it just really kind of shows you some of the extra burden. It's not just that she's grieving her daughter, it's that she has to live with the fact that the last words that they ever spoke to each other were so horrible, and the last thing that she did, like, basically she has to feel like and live with this feeling that her daughter's rape and murder are her fault, and that if she would have just acted more like a loving mother in that moment, this might not have happened at all.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's hard to reconcile that. And
Yeah.
that informs some of her behavior ultimately. There's also this other great scene with John Hawkes as her ex-husband, who tells her that Angela had come to him a week before she died, hoping to move in with him because she couldn't stand living with Mildred anymore. And you can tell it hurts her to hear this because deep down she knows how much their relationship was fractured toward the end. So even though she says at one point, like, she kind of screams out, "I don't believe you." There's kind of this break in her voice that shows that she really maybe does believe deep down, and how she may actually have still been alive if she hadn't still been living with her. So it's that extra layer too there.
Yeah. What I think is interesting in that scene, and I still don't know how I actually feel about it, I'm still
Hmm.
wrestling with that. But what I think that it reveals something about Mildred,
I don't know why I almost called her Margaret. Mildred as
Marge,
a yeah, I guess, yeah.
as in Fargo.
Right, yeah. But it reveals about her that she does, even though she has this gruff, tough exterior and she's really angry and bitter and mad at the world, there's also this deep empathy that she has for other people. And we see that in that scene with John Hawkes, who is her abusive ex-husband,
Yeah.
who in that scene chokes her and only lets go when their son holds a knife up to his throat. And
Hmm.
yet when he starts to break down and cry again over their daughter, she comforts him. She puts her hand on his and she's kind of rubbing his finger, and just like, it's just this very tender, caring, compassionate moment for someone who absolutely does not deserve an ounce of her compassion. And yet
Yeah.
she recognizes in him he's also a grieving father who's
Hmm.
lost his only daughter too. And we see other glimpses of that kind of compassion with her in other scenes too, but I think it's most apparent in this moment with this guy who literally was just trying to choke her.
Yeah. Because there's the other scene of her with Chief Willoughby, and they're kind of going back and forth. And then he has cancer and he coughs up blood in her
Yeah.
face. And she just, puts all her guard down basically and just has such a compassionate look on her face and tries to get him to be treated.
Yeah.
Those moments, just those little switches, I think are quite brilliant. Just the way that she makes that transition happen so quickly into that mothering mode almost.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that is really tricky to pull off, and I think that these are some of those moments that really show McDormand's command of her performance and her real deep understanding of the character.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to talk to some of the more violent aspects of the film, like she gets away with some truly wild shit. Like after the
Small
point
town
of
America.
yeah, I guess so. But after like Willoughby has ended his life and the news is out about it and basically all but blames her and her billboards for it, you know, and this kid at her son's school throws something at her car and she straight up goes out and like kicks two kids in the groin, which is just so wild and doesn't even really go anywhere, like totally unresolved. But it is kind of just like this outlaw Western sensibility that is fun to watch in a way, and she's clearly reveling in it as an actress, and it's certainly sort of cathartic for her too, just to not see her just like cowering in fear, even though she's become the pariah of town. Essentially, she is still going to just come at people just as hard. There's also the whole sequence later on with the hurling the Molotov cocktails at the police department, which is just a completely absurd sequence, I think. But any
Yeah.
thoughts on that sort of like tough talking, cock of the walk, going around town stuff from her?
Yeah. I feel like in some ways it's almost her just trying to stir up trouble and trying to
Yeah.
kind of get attention and just sort of, yeah, we see that lawlessness of her. I mean, the reason that she's in with Chief Willoughby is because she's been arrested, and
Yeah.
for something that she did, and it's just the way that she's just so unapologetic, because what does she have to apologize for? Her daughter was stolen from her and nobody's close to finding any answers, and so she's just kind of mad at the world and gets to act out. And I do think I agree with you. I think McDormand is having a really good time getting to do some of those big scenes, we even the ones that don't quite work. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of it just gets very far fetched in there. I think there's actually many contrivances going
Yeah.
on later on in the end, especially the stuff with Sam Rockwell and him getting involved. And there's been plenty of talk of his whole redemption arc in the film ever
Mhm.
since the film came out. But I think it all does just come back to her and her emotional arc, and how even though the film towards the end just leaves you in this sort of ambiguous state of they haven't actually caught the person who did it, but they kind of found this other guy in town who definitely is a rapist, and her and Dixon are going to team up and maybe go after him, maybe not. And we don't exactly know. She has some good moments in between some of those plot contrivances that I do still hang on to in a way. Like moments like when she gets the call from Dixon and he says he's not the guy that, we haven't really gotten into it, but there's this other guy in town who she thinks it may have been, and it's not actually him. Just the way her face drops in that moment, I think, is very effective, because it's like she did have that one day of hope. And even if it was just that one day, she appreciates that one day, but now it's back to square one almost. But she could channel some of this energy into going after this guy,
Vigilante.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, that scene on the phone, you really feel it. You feel her crushing disappointment, but also you really believe her when she says, yeah, well, you know what? It's okay. It was nice to have a day of hope. That line that she gives, it's like, yeah, I feel that, and I believe that she's not just saying that to try to make him feel better. Like that she really feels that.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have that ambiguous ending, which usually I don't mind in film. I think for this, I think it's aiming at something a little more profound than the film is actually capable of, to be honest. But for as much as I don't care for the film, I think she is largely innocent within that.
Yeah, I really think that this movie should have ended with Willoughby's death and the letters, like him basically having his words of wisdom from beyond, especially the reveal about the billboard and what he did. I think that's really where the story should have ended. They shouldn't have tried to shoehorn this other, like, going out and getting some justice. It just, it really takes away from whatever good had been accomplished up to that point. But yeah, I agree. I think even up to the end, McDormand is great. I think that she's very good, and she keeps the energy going, and she's compelling enough that you can kind of overlook, or at least set aside some of the issues just to enjoy watching her. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, of course, we're running long, so we should probably get into the Oscars here.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
This is my favorite year. I had a lot to say.
I know. I'm not censoring you. Okay. So for the Critics Awards precursors, Frances won some of the regionals: Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Independent Spirit Award too. Sally Hawkins actually did very well. She won the Los Angeles Film Critics and the National Society of Film Critics. Boston, online, she did very well. And Saoirse won the New York Film Critics Award. Chicago, Vancouver, Meryl won with the National Board of Review. Margot Robbie won a few regionals too, so it was pretty spread out overall. And then for the major precursors, Frances McDormand, Sally Hawkins, Margot Robbie, and Saoirse Ronan were all nominated at Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, SAG, BAFTA, boom, 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 boom. And so Meryl was really the only slightly rocky one, where she only had Critics' Choice and Golden Globe nominations, which is maybe partially because the Post came out so late that there wasn't quite enough time for some of those. But either way, Frances did a clean sweep when it came to the wins. Golden Globe drama, Critics' Choice, SAG, BAFTA. Saoirse won the other Golden Globe for comedy musical. Margot actually won the now defunct Critics' Choice Award for Best Actress in a Comedy, so shout out to that. But yeah, that was that. Really no suspense going into it about who was winning the Oscar. So why do we think Frances McDormand won this Oscar?
Because it was 2017. And I don't know if you remember 2017 and what was happening in the world, but that was when the Me Too movement was really taking hold, and violence against women was very much front and center in conversations. And McDormand, not only is she the lead of a movie that is specifically about violence against a young woman, and not only that, but unresolved, like this this case that hasn't been solved yet. And so it felt very much of kind of the moment, but also because Frances, won that Golden Globe and then started winning the televised awards, she had a lot of opportunities to give a lot of speeches and to really speak up and speak out about women's place in the industry, about the experience. And she didn't even have to specifically talk about rape culture or any of that in order for her message to resonate. And so I really think that the biggest thing that happened was the fact that this movie hit at exactly the right time for that message to resonate with the most attentive audience possible. And I think it was inevitable. Nobody else was going to win that Oscar.
Yeah, I think that is exactly right. It was a very charged time politically. And I mean, I went back and watched some of the ceremony, and there was a real sort of almost like a tension in the air of feeling like there's just a lot of injustice in the world and a lot of people feeling this urge to speak out in their speeches. And the kind of performance that Frances is giving in Three Billboards is exactly what fed into that moment. The anger, the desire for justice, the confronting a system that is corrupt and not doing anything about this heinous crime. It's very just galvanizing, I think. And that's where I think we definitely saw life and art intermingling, really.
I think in addition to that, she was also presenting a ray of hope, because she was talking about, it wasn't just, wow, look at what's been happening to women. This is terrible. We need to do something. It was, this has been happening. We're doing something, and here's what we're going to do. And she was acting as a leader and not just a voice talking about how we needed change. But I mean, her Spirit Awards speech, she's talking about like, yeah, have us in your offices, or you know what, come to our offices. We're making deals tonight. And then she even mentions, I don't know if you watched it, but she mentions, yeah, like there's some deals happening today at the Spirit Awards, basically like, Chloe, we got a deal signed, right?
Chloe,
and it's just like, holy crap.
Moments
That's
before
gonna be
history.
our next Oscar. Yeah.
Yes.
And who knew? But
Right.
but yeah, I think it was also her giving people something to hope for and a direction to go. And that really resounded in exactly the way that it needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And even beyond that, it's just such a showy performance. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, the loudest performance and very directly emotional, which is also something I've been talking about a little bit over the course of this decade with wins, where you find yourself very moved by her performance, just like with Brie Larson or Julianne Moore, or I mean, even Emma Stone to a certain extent towards the end. And I think there was just so much respect for Frances in general. And for as great as this lineup is, there was just that motivating factor in sort of identifying with this character of Mildred, who doesn't take shit from anybody and fights for justice and fights for what's right. And it all just sort of crystallized for her to be the sort of avatar of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love that she matched that energy in her Oscar speech, which was such a powerful moment of, getting all the women nominated that night to stand up and telling producers to hire them and hear their stories, and capping it off with, inclusion rider and mentioning that and getting so many people who may not have known about that to learn about it and start to implement it. She's a rock star, and even if I may not love her movie or would have picked her as my winner, there's no doubt for me that speech made a mark and had some impact on the industry ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know if anyone else would have done that. So
no, I don't think anybody else was at that point. I don't think anybody else was trying.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a very powerful speech. Very powerful. I've watched it many times.
Yeah.
And you feel that emotion. So anyway, I think it was a relatively easy race to predict, and not ultimately easy to say who the runner-up may have been, but I do have a few that I'm weighing between, which we will get to in the last segment. I don't know about you, but
interesting, because I do have
okay.
I do have someone that I think is
Okay.
the runner. So
Fair enough.
mhm.
Well, let's get to some of these questions from the listeners. Let's start with Fritz, who said, is this one of the stronger Best Actress lineups? And then Eric Maxwell Bruns wants to know if it's a top 10 lineup of all time. Well, according to you, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, according to me, it is. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think it's right up there with some of the best. I don't know if it's necessarily like top 5 or even 10 of all time, but there are no weak performances here. So, yeah, definitely in the top third of lineups of all time. There have been a lot of great ones. What can I say?
Yeah.
Christoph said, after you heard Frances's speech for the first time, did you have to Google what an inclusion rider was, or did you already know?
I actually don't remember. I don't remember if I already
Okay.
knew or if I looked it up that night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will admit that I did have to Google it. And I love that she took that opportunity to do that. And yeah, inclusion riders, for people who don't know, is this thing that you can put in your contract to have this diverse cast or crew. It's sort of to make a more equitable staff, essentially.
I remember knowing exactly what she was talking about when she said it. That's why I'm not sure if I already knew or if I just
okay.
assumed what it meant and then looked it up and was like, yeah, that's what I thought. I'm not sure.
Context clues, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Dick Thompson said, if Frances didn't win for a third time in lead and so soon, would this win have aged a bit better? In fact, has it aged badly at all, or is that a film Twitter thing?
I think it's a film Twitter thing. I don't know anybody outside of film Twitter who has any complaints about this win.
That's what I was going to say, too. And I think in the broader public eye, this win has aged well, and especially for her speech as well that was associated with it.
Yeah.
I just don't think there was any backlash to it that really affected it in the mainstream. So I think it was a pretty online discussion overall about the film. But I mean, in terms of people like us who follow awards and all this stuff, the fact that she did win a few years later for arguably a better movie and a Best Picture winner, maybe that this win feels a little weaker by comparison, you know? But yeah, just broadly speaking, I think nobody even would know about a 3 Billboards controversy or even anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Dick Thompson said, this year broke the pattern for Best Actress. It was the youngest skewing category of the Oscars, but every win since may have changed that. How much did #MeToo have to do with that shift?
I don't know about going forward, but definitely Me Too had a lot to do with how this lineup turned out, I think, as I was just saying. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting coincidence. I would say that there's been less of the ingenue narrative as of late, but I feel like it has been this odd pattern we've gotten into where like both lead categories seem to be skewing older now.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if that has anything to do with Me Too, or if that's just the way that there's been such a focus on changing and expanding the Academy and who gets to vote. And I think that's where you see just such a broader range. And so you see recognition of a much different type of movie and different types of performances. I mean, I think if Everything Everywhere All at Once had come out even 5 years sooner, Michelle Yeoh wouldn't, like I think that, I mean, maybe here's what I will say. Is I think that the Me Too movement did spark, and I think things like Frances's speech and talking more openly about inclusion, I think that kind of pushed the Academy to move forward and to make some changes. So I will say, I think in that way that the movement did have something to do with the shift.
Yeah. Well, Andy Bayless and Jamie both had the same question, which is basically if Nomadland and 3 Billboards switched, and Nomadland came out first and then 3 Billboards later, do you think Frances still wins for both?
No. And in that case, I'm not sure she wins for either.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I think if Nomadland came out in 2017, she would not have won, because I don't know that she would have even been nominated for that. I think both of these movies kind of had to come out when they did in order for people to see them in the right light. I think Nomadland hitting
in 2020 in the pandemic when everyone was stuck at home and watching things that they might not normally have given attention to. I think that really changed things. And I mean, I love that movie. I think it's beautiful, and I'm so happy that that's an Oscar winner, and I'm so happy that McDormand won for that. But I think that in 2017, if that had come out, people weren't ready for it. And I don't know that she would have even been nominated. I definitely don't think in that lineup of quiet performances that she would have won. And then if Three Billboards came out in 2020, I don't know if people would have wanted that movie that year. I don't know. I mean, it is the same year as Promising Young Woman, which I think those two would have kind of been duking it out and having a story from a female perspective written and directed by a woman versus this one. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. My answer for this was going to be I don't think she wins for Nomadland in this year, especially like you said. But I do think she could still win for Three Billboards in 2020, just because, I mean, that was also a year of definitely a galvanizing moment, even within the pandemic with the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of social change happening that I think there is still a possibility she could have won for that. So.
Yeah, but I definitely don't think that she would have won for both of them.
No, I don't think so. But Jeffrey Kerr said even if Academy members at the time had known that Frances McDormand would be back with Nomadland 3 years later, would the showiness of her work in Three Billboards still have catapulted her to the win?
Yeah. I just think that there was no stopping her.
I agree. Yeah, that's it. Andrew Carden said, rank your favorite Mildreds on film. Davis in Of Human Bondage, Crawford in Mildred Pierce, Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Nega in Loving, and McDormand in Three Billboards. And also Jonathan Howley basically asked a similar question, so combining them.
Oh, that's so hard. You go first.
Okay. Well, I have to go with Joan Crawford and Mildred Pierce. Number one, always my favorite Mildred. And then Betty Davis, number two, in Of Human Bondage. And then that's a little tougher, but I think I might do Ruth Negga in Loving third. And then Louise Fletcher fourth, and then McDormand fifth, sadly. Respect to all of them. That's how I would rank my Mildreds.
So are we ranking the character or the performance?
I just did it by performance because I don't really know how to rank them by character. Like, what's the criteria there?
I think that's why I'm stuck, and that's why I was like, I don't know how to answer this. Like,
you don't have to answer if you don't know how to approach it.
Which one would I want to hang out with? None of them?
Fair. Well, Mildred Loving seems perfectly fine.
Mildred Loving I would hang out with, but she's the only one.
Yeah, I would agree. Yep. All right. Philippe Dumas said, had Sally won the Golden Globe, would she have won the following awards as well? She was the front runner until Frances won the Globe and changed the game.
It's a good question. I don't think so. I think that there was enough attention on McDormand that even the Globe wouldn't necessarily have been enough to seal the deal for Hawkins. And that's the thing is, would she have won subsequent awards? Would she have won SAG? Would she have won Critics' Choice? And I think McDormand still would have gotten those, which would have ultimately led her to the Oscar.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I sort of think Frances would still win at SAG, to be honest. And it would have felt like maybe even Sally could have won at Critics' Choice if they just blindly followed the Golden Globes like they sometimes do. And it would have been like critics versus industry type of thing, where Frances wins SAG and BAFTA, that kind of thing. Also, for what it's worth, Frances has like a very strange history with the Golden Globes. Like, she didn't even win for Fargo. She didn't win for Olive Kitteridge. And I think this might have been her first Globe this year. And I mean, so
the HFPA is kind of weird anyway. But
hot take. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, even if she hadn't won at the Globes, I think Frances still would have gotten that industry support for SAG and stuff. Yeah. Joshua McNeil said, why did Sally Hawkins lose, especially since her film won Best Picture?
To break my heart and hurt me personally.
Karen's like, and I took that personally.
I sure did. No, I really do think that I think there's two things. Again, with the inevitability of McDormand, for one,
Yeah.
but also I think with The Shape of Water, I think one of the things that kind of hurt Hawkins is the fact that it's such a quiet performance and it's so easy to get caught up in all of the technical beauty of the movie and how well directed and written it is that I think Hawkins was just kind of, I think she was overlooked. I think it was easy to miss just how brilliant she was.
Agreed. Just a little too quiet and subtle by comparison to her competition, ultimately.
Yeah.
Frank Hopp said, had Hawkins been nominated for Happy Go Lucky, would she have had a shot at winning this year?
I still think no. Given if everything else
Yeah.
was the same and that's the only thing that changed, no, nothing was stopping Frances.
What is the butterfly effect of that? How much else could have changed in the world if she had been nominated for Happy Go Lucky? Who knows?
The world would be a better place in general.
Maybe. I don't know if we would have flying cars necessarily, but you know. Jamie said Sally Hawkins went from a likely 6th or 7th for Happy Go Lucky to a surprise supporting nom to a lead nom and a Best Picture winner. Why do you think her nominations have stopped there? Is this a matter of how Hollywood uses her, or is her record more coincidence than momentum?
Don't know that I would say it's either.
Right.
I think that's a hard one. I think that it wasn't a coincidence. I think that her getting nominated for Blue Jasmine was, I think it was there was a lot of attention on that movie because of Kate. And I think that Hawkins benefited from that, but she definitely earned her spot. And then I mean, that's when she met Del Toro and was able to get into this movie. And as far as why it kind of stopped after that, I think it's just that she tends to choose roles that don't get a lot of attention, smaller roles in smaller films. And I think that it just the stars just haven't aligned for her again yet. But I think that they might again.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen the last of her at the Oscars.
Yeah. I just don't think she's really had anything performance-wise that's stood out in that way since The Shape of Water to get that kind of recognition, other than maybe like Eternal Beauty, which I think she got something for. She was good in a supporting role in Spencer a few years ago, so there was that, but that was a very small role. I still think there's plenty of time for her to come back. Like, it's only been 7 years. I don't think we need to be, writing her off just because she hasn't been nominated since.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we have so many of these comeback nominations these days after decades and decades that I'm not worried.
And people clearly love her, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Amar said, aside from Hawkins, which one of these characters is most likely to have fallen in love with a hot fish?
Tonya Harding.
I said the same thing. I think Tonya Harding. I'm so sorry. Tonya,
honestly, no, I see Lady Bird just being like, yeah, I could go for this.
Wow. I'm just picturing that scene in Lady Bird with her and Beanie Feldstein in the audience, like watching Lucas Hedges on the stage, and just the two of them sort of like looking at the amphibian man, being like, ah.
It honestly, that feels like such a Lady Bird thing.
It does. Yeah. But the Tonya Harding one, I could also see her doing her little like talking head and being like, well, I bet you want to know about the time I fell in love with a fish man. Here it goes.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, I am Tyler Paul said, how close was Robbie to winning? Do you think it would have helped if Tonya Harding did publicity?
Tonya Harding did do publicity, and I think that hurt because
there you go.
In January of that year, right before the Globes, there was this special, I think it was on 2020. It was the I am Tonya Harding, and she's sort of telling her story, and she actually admitted that she knew more. She still didn't admit the whole thing, but she admitted that she knew more than she had previously acknowledged, and that really caught a lot of people's attention, and they were just like, screw her. And I think that actually hurt Robbie a lot, but again, I don't think she was going to win anyway.
Right. And I also just think, yeah, I know Allison Janney swept, but I think if Margot were close, I think the film would have been nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah,
I
good
would say
point too.
that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, said, do you think the Academy has moved on from the ingenue win in this category since membership change? Margot seemed like she checked all the boxes for an old Academy, yet Emma seems like the last first-time win in this category to fit that trope.
I honestly don't think the Academy has fully moved on from anything. I think that we just go through seasons. And I think right now we're in this time of recognizing people who have been overlooked for a long time, but that doesn't mean that it won't swing back. I think we'll see some of that.
Maybe. Yeah. I think, I don't know, it feels like there has been a little bit of that shift where it's like the person who's either respected or paid their dues or is steadily working, in the case of Jessica Chastain or Emma Stone's second win, where like a mainstream breakthrough doesn't really extend to a win very much anymore, as we saw with people like Lily Gladstone or like even Austin Butler in the lead actor category, or Andra Day, Lady Gaga, Cynthia Erivo, a lot of these people who could have maybe done better in previous eras, but I feel like there needs to be like that foundation of respect and like a well-established career sometimes to help go all the way to a win. I don't know if that's just coincidence or what, but
That's the thing. And that's where a year like the current year that we're in will be sort of a test on that, because we have a young,
yeah,
newcomer who is
Mikey
very
Madison.
much
Yep.
exactly, yeah, for Honora, who very much is at the top of a lot of prediction lists right now as the favorite to win. I personally will hold off on predicting her, but a lot of people think it's going to happen. And so that's where it's like, I don't know. I think this year shows that we're kind of in a test of, has it really shifted, or is it really just kind of year by year? And this is just how it's been the last couple of years.
Right. Interesting. Rob Montoya said, there were some eyebrows raised when it was announced Margot Robbie was being cast as Tonya Harding. Many thought someone like Amy Adams seemed like a better choice. If Adams had been cast instead of Robbie, would Adams finally win and beat Frances McDormand?
No, sorry.
Wow. Brutal.
Well, and I mean, I love Amy Adams.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody was beating Frances. I just don't.
I'm just going to say I think it would have been closer if it was Amy
Maybe.
in the role and it was still the same level of quality that Margot brought, just because she had such an extensive record. And she also looks so much like Tonya, just saying.
She does. It's true. And I've thought a lot about that. And I mean, I think if it were Amy Adams, then possibly the movie would have done better, would have gotten into that Best Picture lineup. I don't know.
JV said, where do you rank Margot's mirror makeup meltdown in the history of mirror makeup meltdowns? Will anyone ever top Glenn Close in Dangerous Liaisons? Well, you know my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's Glenn Close, so I wouldn't say that
Thank you.
anybody's going to be better than that, but I do think it's a pretty great mirror makeup meltdown. I had to think that before I said it out loud. And that's a tongue twister.
Margot's mirror makeup meltdown.
Yeah, it is a pretty great one.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is a great one, but no one tops Glenny. So,
no.
Yeah. Malice doesn't live here anymore, said Margot Robbie currently has 3 Oscar noms, 2 for acting, 1 for producing. If and when she snatches her first Oscar, will it be for acting or producing?
I think it will be for producing her Best Actress win, a la Frances McDormand and Nomadland.
Yeah, I think producing weirdly seems like an easier bet than acting. I don't know why that is. That just feels right.
I definitely think she will win an Oscar for producing. I think it will either come before or the same night as her acting one.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Let's see if we look back on this and be like, damn, Karen's mind. Okay, Captain Jimmy D said, why do you think Saoirse Ronan's Lady Bird performance received more recognition compared to these young female stars in the same coming-of-age genre? Haley Steinfeld in The Edge of 17, Elsie Fisher in 8th grade, Amelia Jones in Coda, Alana Haim in Licorice Pizza.
Okay, I love Haley Steinfeld in The Edge of 17. And I mean, I really like several of these performances, not all of them. I think
Mhm.
that I think the difference with Saoirse Ronan and Lady Bird, I think some of it has to do with the script and how it feels the most real and relatable of these examples that were given.
Mhm.
I think that there's just something that just feels so just something that so many people can recognize in themselves. I mean, Haley is great. The Edge of 17 is a really good movie, but I think that there's just I think in general it just goes a little too far for some people, at least at the time that it came out. I think eighth grade was I know that there are plenty of girls who appreciated that movie and really felt seen with it, but I think that the Academy at large just didn't recognize that. And I think part of the problem was the fact that you have an eighth grade girl story being told from a male perspective, not from a female one.
Yeah.
And I think with Coda, I think that that movie was not real. The performances are good. I'm not saying that it's not, but I think that that movie rested on so many other things besides Amelia Jones. And I would like to have seen her get recognized. I do think that, especially for a Best Picture winner, that movie was really way underperformed with overall nominations. Amelia Jones does feel like massively overlooked, but I think that people didn't expect that movie to do what it did. And I think if the nominations had come maybe after SAG that year, she would be nominated. I don't
Yeah.
think that she would have still won, but I think that she would have gotten nominated. I think that movie probably would be looking at 8 or 9 overall nominations instead of 3. So, yeah. And then I don't want to talk about Licorice Pizza.
Okay. Noted. Yeah. Well, just to speak to Lady Bird and its specialness, I just think the quality of the writing and the directing, it just really is what put everyone over the line. Plus, Saoirse is a 2-time nominee already by this point, so she's definitely well respected and in the club. So
Yeah.
I just think that combination was sort of that X factor ultimately. And it felt like it was speaking to something that speaks more to a general audience, perhaps, than just a teenage girl experience. There was something more universal, I think, in what Lady Bird is exploring,
No,
perhaps.
I think that is absolutely fair because you do also have this her mother, even her father
Yeah.
to some extent. Like you have these other perspectives and how everybody's lives are affected and how everybody's
Yeah.
lives affect each other too. And I think yeah, there's a lot of universality to that.
Yeah. Well, Sophia Simonello said,
I love
it
her.
sometimes, yes, we love her on this show. It sometimes feels like a miracle that a movie like Lady Bird was recognized with Oscar noms. What are some other lead performances in coming of age movies directed by women that you would have loved to see nominated in this category?
I mean Amelia Jones and Coda.
Haley Steinfeld in The Edge of 17,
Uh-huh.
as previously mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, can we say Alicia Silverstone in Clueless?
Absolutely we can. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. For sure.
Um,
That's a good one.
I also thought of Journey Smollett in Eve's Bayou as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good movie. She's so
Yes.
great in that.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
those are the big ones for me.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Edwards said, "Is this most likely the closest Saoirse Ronan has gotten to winning the prize?"
I think probably.
I think Brooklyn is the one where I feel
Maybe.
relatively confident that she was at least the runner-up. I'm not going to spoil anything about this one because that's not till later, but I think she was definitely closer for this maybe than for Little Women or Atonement. So
Yeah. I would like to think that she was really close on Atonement, but come on, they don't give children Oscars
yeah,
very often.
not
So
anymore. Yeah, last one I think was Anna Paquin. Yeah.
hmm Yep.
J. Robbins Leon, would Saoirse have had more momentum had we not had 2 ingenue wins in a row, Stone and Larson, and another Lawrence earlier in the decade?
I don't think any of those three had anything to do with why Saoirse didn't win. as
Are we
as
just going
we've
to go back
already
to
said.
Frances? Yes. No one was stopping Frances.
Nope.
Yeah, I think that just overpowered any other narrative ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh boy. Hugo Valpad said, will Saoirse be the new Amy Adams or rather the new Glenn? Shots fired.
I think that that is possible, but I really do hope that she's the new Meryl.
Wow. Yeah, I love that you're aiming high with Saoirse. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if she doesn't win a first Oscar in the next couple of years, that she is looking at being the new Glenn, and she'll just end up with 7 or 8 nominations and just never actually win. But you know what? I think she's okay with that. I don't
Yeah.
get the sense from her that she's just like desperately trying to win an Oscar. She's just kind of like,
No.
whatever. If it happens, it happens. That'll be fine. I'll have to give a speech.
Yes.
But, I don't
Exactly.
I don't get the sense from her. And I feel the same with Glenn Close, too. I don't feel the sense of like she's desperately trying to win.
Right. It's definitely something her fans are more invested in than she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is also true of Amy Adams, for the
Mhm.
record. She's
Yes.
specifically talked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Saoirse's still very young, so I'm not going to give up hope on that. So, Owen Daly said, which actresses here other than Ronan and Robbie would you most like to see work together? Doesn't have to be a Queen of Scots film, as they say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did get to see Ronan and Streep work together very soon
Right.
after this in Little Women. That was fun. Honestly, I would like any combination of them. I would love to see Sally Hawkins and Saoirse Ronan in a movie together.
Yeah. I was going to say Meryl Streep and Frances McDormand. Like,
that could be fun.
I don't know what that would be, but like, I want to see it and have them be co-leads.
Yes. Let's do it.
Yep. Matthew WG101, will Meryl ever be nominated again? And Jimmy asks if Streep fatigue finally hit the Academy.
I think she might be nominated again. I think it's more likely that she'll be nominated in supporting than lead. Just based on the types of roles that she's taking these days and how much she's just kind of, I mean, she's older, she's kind of stepping back, and not that she's not doing a lot of work still. She's still working a lot, but I think what she's choosing to take on has changed. And I don't think that it's Streep fatigue. I think it's just in the last few years, what has she done that would be really an Oscar movie? I don't see it, but I don't think it's that the Academy hasn't wanted to nominate her.
Yeah, her last movie is Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
From 2021.
Yeah. And if anybody was getting nominated for that, it should have not been her. It should have been like Cate Blanchett.
I think there's still time. It's fine. Nothing to worry about. She just has to make movies if she's interested in it, and she doesn't even have to. What does she have to prove?
Right.
So, yeah, she could just hang out with Martin Short on Only Murders and live the rest of her life happy.
Yeah. Those two crazy kids.
Ugh. I believe in love again.
Yep.
You kind of already answered this, but Giordano Luann, do you think Meryl will ever win another competitive Oscar? You think so?
Yeah, I think she will. Again, I think it'll be for supporting actress, but yeah.
Or it could be for this rumored Joni Mitchell film that she may be doing, playing Joni Mitchell in older age.
Could be interesting too.
Maybe.
I will
I don't know.
be there to see it if it really happens.
Yes. Okay, this is a big one. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but both Fritz and Zoe G want us to rank all of Meryl Streep's Best Actress nominations now that we're at the end.
All of them. Oh, gosh.
All 17 Best Actress nominations.
That's so many.
I'll reveal my list here.
Okay.
Should I start at the top or the bottom? What do you think?
Bottom. You always got to count up.
Okay. 17, The French Lieutenant's Woman. I don't know if I have to provide commentary on this, or it'll take too long.
Yeah.
16, Florence Foster Jenkins. 15, Music of the Heart. 14, August Osage County. 13, The Iron Lady. 12, Out of Africa. 11, Ironweed. 10, One True Thing. 9, The Post. 8, A Cry in the Dark. 7, Julia and Julia. 6, Postcards from the Edge. 5, Doubt. 4, The Devil Wears Prada. 3, Silkwood. 2, Sophie's Choice. and won the Bridges of Madison County, baby.
Hmm. That's a great ranking. I will just say
Thank you.
yes. Thank you.
Any big changes from that for you personally?
Um,
Anything you violently disagree with me on?
Honestly, no. I mean, I might probably
Wow.
rank
Okay.
things in slightly a different order if I actually took
Yeah.
the time to do this, but not anything glaring, so no.
Great. I'm
Yeah.
glad I have your approval there. CJ Frayed said, "What role do you think Meryl Streep was snubbed for outside of her 21 nominations?"
That's really hard. It's funny. I actually wrote an article a few years ago about like her best non-nominated roles, and I tried to find it, but it's like locked up in a vault somewhere on the internet. But
Oh, no.
one that I would love to have seen her get nominated for is Death Becomes Her.
Yes.
Mhm.
I love comedy Meryl.
Yes, she is so
It's the
funny and
best.
she's so brilliant. That movie should have had like 12 nominations.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that answer. I would also add in The Hours, which
The
I always
Hours,
have to
yeah.
remind myself she wasn't nominated for. So,
Yeah. I forget that too. I don't know why
yeah.
she wasn't. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, Liam Gagin and Heather Stewart both want to know if there's anything since 2017 we would have nominated Meryl for. Not a lot of options there.
Not for an
But
Oscar, no.
no, not for me. Existential Rock said, "At one point, a long time ago, Meryl was just a one-time Best Supporting Actress nominee. Which one-time Supporting Actress nominee has the chance to break her nomination record? More broadly, do you think we'll ever see someone break her record?" Wow, this is quite a intellectual exercise here.
It is. I think it's very, like, as much as I've commented a couple of times that I think Saoirse could do it, I think it's very unlikely anybody will ever break her
Yeah.
record because that's a big record. And it's even become like it's kind of a joke. People even at the Oscars, they joke about like, oh, Meryl's here, she must be nominated for something. And I just
Mhm.
don't see anybody being able to. I mean, someone would have to start, it really would have to be someone like Saoirse, who started very young and,
Right.
and just has been consistent. And I don't think that we tend to give enough longevity to people to have and the opportunities. I think one of the things you have to think about too with early in her career, there were a lot fewer actresses. Now there's so
Just in
many
general.
stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a
Mhm.
lot more people to go around, a lot more people vying for roles. I just don't think that we give, like, I don't think anybody has the opportunity to do what she's doing.
Yeah, and to have that kind of longevity to
Mm-hmm.
rack all those up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to think about like only people who have only gotten one supporting actress nomination is very specific criteria. So I was just like, I was looking through the list of supporting actress and being like, I don't know, Florence Pugh. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
The answer I would love to have said is Kirsten Dunst, which she should have had like 6 or 7 nominations before The Power of the Dog.
It's
But
so true.
Hollywood didn't know what they were doing.
Yep.
But my true like passion pick answer would be like someone like Hong Chow. I would love to see her just keep racking up nominations.
And
Just saying.
eventual wins too. Yes.
And wins. Yes.
I love Hong Chow. That's a great
Alicio,
answer.
yes, yes. Alicio said, "Which of these films would you most want to see a prequel, and which would be best suited to have a sequel? And what would you title them?" I don't know about titles, but
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which of these I'd want to see a prequel to, but I definitely would love to see a sequel to Lady Bird where, she's grown up, maybe she has a daughter of her own and she's kind of in that in between, like where you're sort of having to
wow.
parent your parent but also parent your kid. I would be very interested to see that time of Lady Bird's life.
Me too. I think she would be down for that too.
Mm-hmm.
Both Saoirse and Greta, I
Yeah.
think. I don't know what else. Like, what are we gonna do? Like a 3 Billboards sequel just to see what Mildred and Dixon got up to when they got to Idaho, if they got to Idaho.
Oh, that sounds horrible. I
Yep.
think
more stories about Kay Graham would be okay. I mean, she was
Sure.
really influential over her career and everything that happened with the Washington Post from 71 on. And there's more
I mean,
stories there.
the movie literally sets it up like it's going to be a sequel with the Watergate at the
It's
end.
so true. I don't want that movie, please, but there
Next
are some
time
other
on
big
The
ones.
Post. Yes.
So true.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Adam said, which former Best Actress winners would you have present each nominee 2008 style? I don't know if you did this one, but
I didn't. I should have.
that's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. Just listen to mine and you can approve or disapprove.
Okay.
For Sally Hawkins, I went with Holly Hunter, someone who also played mute in the piano.
That's smart. That's smart.
Hmm.
I mean,
For
I was just
Margot
thinking
Robbie,
basic like Kate Blanchett, but
that works too. Because, yeah. Margot Robbie, I said fellow Aussie Nicole Kidman. I don't know. There's something spiritually like with To Die For that works with I, Tonya for me. I don't know.
I could go with that.
Plus, they would work together in Bombshell a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
Saoirse Ronan, I just went with the previous year's winner and said Emma Stone. I don't know. Easy A, coming of age. I didn't think too hard about it.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. For Meryl Streep, I did Jane Fonda,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
which would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for Frances McDormand, I decided to do a fun one and just have her reunite with her Something's Gotta Give co-star Diane Keaton. Just
Oh,
for
I
fun.
love that. Yes. That's
Yeah.
a good one. I like that. I like all those. Those are good.
Thanks. Yes. If I were in charge, this is what would happen. As long as they were willing to do that too. Okay. Joey Gentili said, recast these 2010s Oscar talents and Karen Black in these nominated roles. Jennifer Lawrence, Laura Dern, Rachel Weisz, Melissa McCarthy.
Oh gosh.
Well, yes. Here's my combination that I came up with here.
Mhm.
For Mildred, Melissa McCarthy. Why not?
Interesting.
I think that would play a little more comedically than the film does, but especially like kicking the kids in the groin. But she could tap into a certain anger, I think.
Yeah, well, we know she can do drama too because we've seen it.
Obviously.
So,
Yeah. Eliza, I said Rachel Weisz. Of those, makes the most sense for that.
Yeah.
For Tonya, I have Karen Black.
For sure. Yes, for sure.
Yes, right?
Absolutely.
For Lady Bird, I guess Jennifer Lawrence, but I don't know if she would be the best fit, but that's the option I have. And then for Catherine Graham, Laura Dern.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you would do it a different way. It's sort of that's sort of an interesting group of people. So yeah, I don't know another way to do it.
Fair enough. Greg Adams, the second year in a row where you could argue Annette Bening was snubbed. Should she be here for Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool?
Okay, I really liked her in that film, but I don't think I would change this lineup.
Yeah, it's good how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Lord knows we don't need another movie with a long title in it. 3 Billboards is already long enough.
It's so true. It's so true. I will say to Greg's question though, because at the beginning of this, when we were talking about snubs, I said, I have a very specific and limited definition for myself of what a snub is. And I would agree with him that Annette Bening has often felt like she was being snubbed by the Academy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I wouldn't change this lineup.
Yeah,
sorry.
Exactly.
I would snub her, I guess.
Well, I never even saw the movie, so I can't really say if I would snub her so much as...
Never saw Annette Bening as Gloria Graham?
No, I still haven't. I don't know what happened. It escaped me.
That's okay.
Yeah. Josh said, this was a strong year. I remember Judi Dench as Queen Victoria was an early frontrunner before things started to unfold. What happened there for her to fizzle out and eventually be snubbed? This is for Victoria and Abdul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I really liked that movie. I just think that ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that it looked too much like other things that we'd seen from Dench in her career. The movie felt too much like just a little too saccharine, I think, for what the mood was at the time. And
Right.
I don't this is one where I don't feel like that was a snub. I feel like she was easily in like a 6, 7, 8 spot. I think she was very nearly in. I don't think she was intentionally left out.
Yeah. She was nominated at SAG, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure she was pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were just other films that were more loved in general. That is part of what pushed her out too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, final one. AJ Box said Jennifer Lawrence gave an incredible performance in Mother, in my opinion. What do you think about her performance? If the movie had received less divisive reviews, do the Academy members watch it and nominate J-Law?
I did not enjoy the movie Mother, but I will agree that her
Most
performance
people
was
didn't.
very good. I think that she
Yeah.
she was incredible. I agree with that. I don't think the divisive reviews were the barrier for Academy members. I think it was just the movie was too weird for them. I think a lot of people, even if they had started to watch it, would have turned it off pretty quickly and wouldn't have
Yep.
seen it through. So I don't think the reviews were what did it for them.
Agreed. Yeah. It's just genre bias too, I think,
Yeah.
with the horror of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a big risk. And I know it didn't pay off for a lot of people, obviously, and she got a Razzie nomination for it, which is disgusting.
It's so
But
unfair. Yeah.
yeah, the performance worked for me, as did Michelle Pfeiffer's performance as well in that movie.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yep,
Yeah, they both should have been nominated, but again, I don't know who I would take out for
right.
to make room for her. So
That's the thing.
yeah.
Yep. Well, let's get to our final segment where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Karen, who was the runner-up?
As much as I would love to say the star of our Best Picture winner was the runner-up, I think the real runner-up was Saoirse Ronan for Lady Bird. I think with the screenplay and with just so much attention
Yeah.
on that, and the fact that it was her third nomination, and people really did love her and they really did love that performance. I think all of those things would have made her rise to the top. And it would have felt right. I mean, there was even a point in that race where I thought, I don't know, maybe she could do it. She was the only one at any time during that campaign where I thought maybe if Frances doesn't win, it goes to her. She's the only one I thought that though. I never thought anybody else had a chance. So yeah. And I really do think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people really loved that movie and they loved the script. Obviously, because Greta, is right there. So I think that those things contributed, and I think that's why she is the runner-up.
Okay. Well, I think I would probably rule out Margot Robbie and Meryl Streep, at least. So it is between Sally and Saoirse. I actually am going to say Sally Hawkins was the runner-up, personally,
Okay.
I think. And I think it's very possible she could have been the runner-up all along in the whole race of Globe, SAG, Critics' Choice, BAFTA. I just think there's such a showiness to that performance that seems a little bit more Academy friendly, traditionally speaking. And, obviously doing it's a very risk-taking mute performance, like a Holly Hunter and the piano kind of thing in the Best Picture winner. Clearly the film they love the most of the 5, even in a lineup full of almost all Best Picture nominees. I will just say that it's Sally Hawkins, but I'm not positive if that's not hope dicting a little bit on my behalf. So, yeah. Plus she had some critics' love. I think there was enough buzz that, like, even if she had just a small pocket of support compared to the overwhelming win that Frances got ultimately, I think it could have been there for her.
The beautiful thing is that we can both be right.
I love that for us. Yes. And who would you have voted for from this lineup?
Sally Hawkins. Yeah. I love her.
Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I still love her so much. And I think that's part of why she was one of my most heartbreaking losses, is the fact that I never felt like she was really going to win, even though I loved her work so much.
Yep. I also would have voted for Sally Hawkins as well. I had such hope earlier in the season because it felt like it could be her. The film was getting so much buzz, and then the industry happened and the major precursors, and then I just lost hope. And that's what happened. I just
Yeah.
think it's a beautiful performance, and I think it's timeless. I think it will continue to hold up in the years to come in a way that other performances here may not, for all we know.
Yeah.
So
I
it
just
just
bought
has
the
that.
I just
Mhm.
bought the Criterion 4K and it is so beautiful.
It's beautiful. I got it too.
Oh, it's
Yeah, just to
gorgeous.
watch it for this,
Yeah,
and worth it. Very worth it.
absolutely.
Yes. All right, Karen, thanks so much. What a detailed breakdown of 2017 we had. Thank you so much for bringing all of your great perspective. I always love talking with you about this.
Thank you so much, Kevin. This has been such a joy for me. And just the fact that everything lined up the way that it did so that this got to be the one that I talked with you about just
I know.
was perfect.
It's fate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where can people find more of you online?
Well, you can find me on some of the social medias at Karen M. Peterson, and there you can find links to my work at Citizen Dame and Awards Watch and The Watch and Talk.
Yes, go follow Karen. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. Shows at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, if you care about Twitter anymore, anyone out there. Instagram at And the Runner Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you heard, go to patreon.com/And the Runner Up is for a whole bunch of bonus episodes. Next week, we'll be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2018, where the nominees were Yalitza Aparicio for Roma, Glenn Close in The Wife, Olivia Colman in The Favorite, Lady Gaga in A Star is Born, and Melissa McCarthy in Can You Ever Forgive Me, with the winner being Olivia Colman. Oh boy, folks, strap in. So with that, thanks again, Karen, and I will bid you all adieu.